Hello and welcome to episode 106 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as usual, is Mr. Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How you doing?
Not too bad. How about you?
Yeah, getting there. Bit of a rush. We're all getting there. Before we go anywhere else, let's talk about Element Games. There's a load of new stuff out this week we're going to talk about. And, Element are the place to go. Still, I think the service is great. We've seen a lot of people using different bits. GW are putting out so much cool stuff, but Element have got. I've seen a few people picking up airbrushes and things this time of year. I don't know why this has happened in the last couple of months, but
I'll tell you something funny. I was looking for some, the needle lubrication stuff, and I thought, I need a bit of that. So then, obviously, I had a quick look on like Amazon and places, and I was like, blimey, it's expensive because people are shipping it from the States.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, blimey, I'm not paying £40 for some needle lubricant. And then I thought, I'll just Google it. And then obviously the top hit was Element Games.
Yeah.
And like £3 something in Element Games versus 45 on Amazon.
Yeah, I was looking at buying something secondhand off someone. I was like, no, it's cheaper at Element. Which is crazy.
It's funny. You sometimes forget, don't you, how cheap it can be buying it new and from someone like Element.
It certainly helps, especially in that pre-order week if it's GW stuff and it's that 20% off. It all helps. It all goes towards purchasing other stuff, and I absolutely understand if you've got a local friendly gaming shop, you're going to support them to a point, but I don't. We play at a club, and when I spend money, I sometimes sit there and think, what am I doing? Let's spend it there. Let's save that money for something else. Hey ho, it's all good. So have you been doing anything? We left you painting along last time.
Yeah, I've been doing not a great deal actually. Certainly not got a lot done. I've done this before, where I get into a funny stage of painting where I sort of stop midway through, or where I'm very near the end and then start something else. I'm at that odd stage where I've decided to sort of pick up random bits and pieces. And it was only the last night I thought, do you know what? I better crack on with getting the Dark Elder guy's base and stuff done. So I sort of, sometimes lose track of time and think, it'll be fine. And then look at the actual number of days left between now and Crystal Brush and think, no, actually, I better actually get my arse in gear.
Yeah, tell me about it. I got my order through from Element, actually, of the got my Sister's Silence and the grenade launchers from Cromlech, and just haven't touched them because we've been doing bits and pieces and what have you, and all of a sudden that time flies, and we're away till the end of the month pretty much now. So it's like, got 2 months then and other stuff going on. So I'll get whatever's done, we'll get done. I think I've got enough for what I want to do up there. It's just not necessarily the things I want, but it's enough to take. I'm sure I can do like either a couple of squads, or I've got Janisha Kroll I need to put together and paint. So, that's a good chunk of making something look good and being part of that force, because I'm only going to be playing Zone Mortalis and Centurion, so it's a good chunk of points as well. It's not extortionate, but it all helps. And what hasn't helped is in going through, the big sell-off still going on. You're going through boxes, and I found
the great sale of 2019.
I thought I'd sold all my old 40k Space Wolves, and I found a load with some characters in there that potentially people might be after, things like that. And it's like, that's good. I might have to put a few of them on eBay at some point. When we get back, I'm going to be hitting that hard again, keeping a spreadsheet on how much I've spent and how much I've recouped this year. I was going to keep one on hobby hours again, but I'm so far behind already.
Given up on that already?
Well, sort of, because I was going to keep a record of podcast hours, but then I found it's actually quite hard to work out exactly what I'm doing. And I was going to do gaming as well, but I didn't want to do a number of games. But then I'm like, then I go to the club for 3.5 hours to play one game. Actually, that's not worth doing. It's all getting a bit silly. I'll just cut back on it, but try and make sure I get something out. I do need something to kind of remind me, to poke me to do it, but I don't want it to become a detriment when I'm looking at the numbers going, I'm way off, and start feeling like that.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a demotivator, do you? It's got to be a motivation sort of exercise, otherwise there's not much point in doing it.
Yeah, and this first quarter of the year is always going to be, there's a lot going on, playing some more, there's a couple of one-day events, things like that, so that's cool, that's good, but that's not, that's not going to help hobby time-wise. So, and lots of other stuff going on in real life, so yeah, we'll just plod along and hopefully post up the odd thing and get people, keeping me honest on it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we shall see. But what doesn't help is when you're trying to do one project and then GW go and release Titanfall early and Titan Death early and new Reavers. What did we get today? Well, we had on the Sunday we had the pre-releases go up for Saturday. So the Titan Death book, which is rumoured to be £22 in the UK. I think that's not a bad price. Be interesting to see exactly what kind of information we get in there. I think there's 8 Legio rules, but we don't know how much background there is. But it's new campaign system, new mana pools, new missions, which is good, hostile environments, lots of cool stuff for Adeptus Titanicus. And we're also getting a new Reaver variant as well, which means at some point we'll be getting the Reaver arms sold separately, which is probably
cool.
Might be what I wait for rather than buying the whole thing itself. But there's some cool stuff. And then transfers as well. Legio Vulpa, Legio Krytos and Legio Solaria, if you want to do them. And their associated night houses on there as well. So it's really good way if you are collecting a Legio to go and jump in that way, get those and away you go. And then someone like me does their own one and needs completely different. I might actually end up choosing one of them and borrowing bits and pieces and just using it for my own Legio. Because it's all very well going and getting custom decals for everything, but again, that costs money more than...
It does, yeah.
So, can't keep justifying those kind of costs, unfortunately.
Yes, you have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely do. And a few other little bits and pieces as well. We also had some Facebook. Well, we've had quite a lot actually. It's been quite not a busy period for releases per se, but for information. And of course, we had the open day. I went up to the New Year's open day, the long drive, the early morning this time, and interesting. So you've been to one of the new style ones, haven't you? You talked about it on the show.
Yes, I think the Vigilus one I went to. Was it a similar sort of deal?
So same setup, but apparently they sold more tickets. They allowed more tickets for this event.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and kid tickets don't count. So if you've got a kid under 12, 14 or something, they're allowed in free. So they don't count them, which is interesting. And I've heard that they've kind of admitted they sold too many tickets. I walked into the hall, then kind of remembered that it was only what's in the hall. Like, oh, okay. Walk round to the Forge World part first. It's like, oh yeah, there's some Blood Bowl stuff. Yeah, there's cool. There's some cool models. There's some of the team. I don't really know those guys that much. There's Andy and the Specialist 3. 2 other Specialist Games guys there with some Adeptus Titanicus stuff and the Ambots from Necromunda. Some really cool, a couple of cool miniatures and whatever. And I was like looking around, just like, oh, okay, so that's it really. There's no one from Heresy. There was a Forge World painter. Or 2, probably, possibly, but no one like specifically for Heresy at all. It's a bit of a shame not to have at least one there, and I think I don't know if that's got something to do with the fact we've got the Weekender coming up or not, but still, not everyone who's there will be at the Weekender.
That's true. Yep.
And yeah, and then I walked around and John Blanche was in the corner kind of doodling away and, a few other people. It's good to go and see and chat to Jervis was there. The Games Workshop Prime part of it seemed to have, I don't want to say big names, but more of the people that you connect with immediately.
Yes, yeah.
And obviously it's bigger as well, so it has more. I completely appreciate that. But from a Heresy standpoint, it was a bit, we got Adeptus Titanicus. Not everyone who plays Heresy is that interested in Adeptus Titanicus. But yeah, so I kind of walked round and thought, stuff it, let's go and have breakfast. Went and had breakfast, and then walked back in and had another wander round and stopped, chatted to some people, went and had a cup of tea, and then, wandered around again, chatted to some more people, and thought, you know what, I think I'm going to shoot off early. And I was...
So, was there... I mean, with the Vigilus one, it was very much based upon the Vigilus release, and then the new models that were linked to that, and it was almost like a you were paying to go to the release party of this new product. Do you know what I mean? So there was lots to talk about, and there were seminars about it, and they were a bit like a weekender where they talk about, oh, this is the new book, and this is the new these are the new models, and this is the story behind. So there was a lot of content that I didn't get too involved in, but there was content, if you know what I mean. So was there anything like that at the New Year's Day one? Or
no seminars. They had Dan Abnett and Josh Reynolds there to do signings, which were kind of... It was a bit that we didn't know where they were happening, and then it was announced that they were at the back of the Black Library part of the shop, which is fair enough. But it was like, there's a few people going, Greg, do you know where they're doing the signings? I'm like, no idea, mate. And they don't. Oh, they had cake. To be fair, on the way in, they had a slice of a cupcake for everyone. I don't know. It felt a bit wishy-washy.
I've always felt, I mean, this is just my opinion, I've always felt the New Year's Day event to be the weakest event. And the event, I'd always think, well, what are you going to really have that's going to be that exciting on you?
Well, the first
on the New Year's Day one.
First one wasn't bad. The thing for me is it's a good time to go up because I've had that break.
It's relatively, that period off and stuff.
And it fits well. I don't feel guilty about taking that time off because I've been with the missus for the 2 weeks beforehand, that kind of stuff. But it was very... It was an open day, but on a small scale. There wasn't any theme. I mean, they were showing off the new 40k campaign system thing. We had the Amble, the Ambots. We had stuff on show that was cool, and people there to talk to. But it felt crowded because of those extra tickets. And from a heresy point of view, I felt like, yeah, okay. Nothing here at all is a bit disappointing. Adeptus Titanicus, cool. Bit of Blood Bowl, that's cool, don't get me wrong. But primarily heresy, they decided to show us a video, which is great. We had, I felt like 10 or 12 minutes of standing around waiting for the technical problems to be fixed and it was something like that. And we had a short video showing the Amble, which was 20 yards away in a glass cabinet. It's like, okay, that's cool. Don't get me wrong. The video's cool. I like it. We're all at the event. We can walk over and see it.
It's right over there.
Yeah, it just felt a bit wishy-washy to the point where I drove over 7 hours for it, and I stayed there. Well, I got there 45 minutes before it opened. And I'm trying to think what time I left now. Probably about 1. No, a bit later than that because I stopped and chatted to a few different people that I'd met. But yeah, and it was £12.50 rather than the old £7.50.
Right.
If you're local,
did you go round the old
hall? Yeah,
miniature hall thing.
Yeah, and there's some cool changes in there, but I've been around it a lot over time.
Yeah, that is the problem, isn't it? Yeah, they do make changes, but there's the majority of it is the same, and you sort of walk straight past stuff that you've looked at.
Yeah.
Before.
So I think if I was local and like my mate James was there, and he's local, he's got his lad, and it's a day out for his lad. He doesn't have to pay for his lad. That's not too bad for him. It's a little drive over. Bearing in mind it cost me £50 worth of fuel. Got to eat. Usually eat there and on the way home because it's that awkward time. And it starts to become. I'm really going to have to question whether I'm going to go to any anymore. But I mean,
that was my big question from when once they took away the mini golden demons. For me, it was like these smaller events don't really have anything that I'd want to devote all that, because it's the travel, like you said, it's the fuel, it's the the length of time it takes to get there, all the food and everything else. It's quite an expensive day trip, so it's really got to have something to want to make you go all that way. In some ways, like things like the weekend I think are better value for money, because you're doing the same amount of travel, but obviously you're getting a much longer experience out of it, aren't you? Because you're having the weekend and you come up on a Friday night, etc., etc.
It's also more focused.
Actually means, so there's more to do, see and do. So I just think it's like they are, for me, that's why I do like those events.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's it's cool. I can see them still selling out. Lots of people having fun. Let's not forget that. Again, there's an element that I don't always ask as many questions as other people, because I'm just not that type of person.
And there's only so many times you can't ask the same question.
No, and again,
you get it answered. So there's a limit, isn't there, to what you're going to ask and see and do, etc.
I sat there with John Blanche, and I don't really know what to say to him. I'm not an artist. I don't really get it. I talked about it before. So sit there and look at his cool pictures, and I'm not. I don't sit there and go, when I was 8, I saw this and blah. I'm just not that kind of guy. So, and that's fair enough. But for the people who are those kind of guys, you get to meet these people and chat to them. It's brilliant. A short chat to Jervis and Sam and Ben, the Ages in my Rules Writers crew. Good to chat to Jess, and a couple of others who I know/don't know, but see at these events, and we always get to have a little. Catch up what's going on, talking about, whatever really. Just two old guys who've been in the hobby for a while. It's good fun, but it's just not worth that much money. I can put that to better use. Again, it might be different if we had a carload going up and it was a specific event and we made an event of it. But what gets me is they have that space for gaming and people go and game, and some of those people, I suspect, were gaming all day. And I'm like, you've paid £12.50 to come and game here all day? And, okay, they might be here with other people who've done other things and stuff, but part of me is like, just come a different day. Like, if you're not going to engage in everything else, come when it's free. And when you've got more choice of tables and there's less people shoving around, you can eat at the bar without having to wait 30 minutes, But, it's part of the fun, isn't it? There's going to be no big open day thing. That was it. But we've had some more stuff popping around online. Somebody there was a post, I can't even remember where it was, but and Ellis wrote to Forge World saying, can we have plastic starter set it was to do with they're doing the Builder Legion thing, Taylor 4 Wargamers for Heresy on Warhammer Community. And on that thread, can we have a plastic starter set to start our armies then? Forge World, well, we certainly have plans to see some of the plastic models return in the future. More information coming later. So those Betrayed Cowth boxes that have gone, the actual packs that have disappeared, seems like it is probably just a manufacturing process. We know they need more the factory up and running so they can keep up with demand. I mean, there is a small chance that it's a starter set with old models in. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. I think it would be good. I think it would be cool. I think you don't necessarily need new models in a starter set, but having a kit which people can go, I want to play the Horus Heresy, I can pick up this box for £100. I can play Horus Heresy is a good idea. Whether it happens or not, that's a different story, isn't it? But
indeed,
yeah, we won't flog the dead horse too much with that one. And let me try and find what else was there. Well, I don't know if you saw the Wild Bangarang, the jogging bottoms with the Legion symbols on.
Yes, I did. Yes, I saw that.
So I linked these, and I was half tempted with the Space Wolves one. I kind of like them. The Eye of Horus ones, maybe. Some of the others I can't stand. And I was like, okay. So when they went live, I thought I'll go and see how much they are. And I'm not going to wear them out. It would be my clothing for slobbing around the house. Yeah, absolutely. And then I saw they were £35 each. And thought, you know what?
Wow.
Yeah, I definitely don't like them that much. So, cool, I suppose, if you want to show off your colours. Yeah, not my thing.
You don't have the body to carry them off either.
Oh, shush you. I absolutely do. So, yeah, that was an interesting one. But I thought, in all fairness, I should probably, having kind of said they were around, maybe pull back on that one. Because, yeah, I say, too rich for my blood. And then finally, today, we got Horus Heresy rules for the Knight Armigers and the Dominus, I think it's called.
Yeah, so they're the plastic.
So they're the new plastic ones.
G-Dub Knights, the newer ones that they made. There's the little baby one and then the bigger version.
Yeah, the mini Knights and then the huge big Knight with all the guns. And it's pretty much get you by rules. There's hints in there that it's get you by rules because there's little asterisks and there's little things that don't necessarily have all their rules in place. So it looks like this is probably a tease. I suspect they've probably written the rules up somewhere else already and have decided to tease us with these. That's my guess. I don't know for sure, because to put these out and then to go away and write rules for them seems counterproductive, and to have specific heresy rules that don't necessarily work properly seems a bit strange. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the new Black Book.
That would make sense. I mean, they do often, when the new Black Books come out, they usually then sort of like get all those extra bits that have come out via other means and sort of stick them all into that book, don't they? We've often seen that in the past.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is great for me. This is I've got all my knights sitting up there. We can take the Mechanicum can take them in their armies, knight armies. Now we've said the Armigers might provide that level that normal stuff can hurt, or certainly don't need the big weapons to be able to deal with an Armiger. So more of your army can interact with the enemy. There's potential for that to happen, but we'll see what the full rules are. They've got some really interesting rules. The harpoon that they can fire, which is you can only fire it every other turn. It's only 12 inches.
Okay.
It's only 12 inches, but if it hits, it's stuff's going to go boom, and people are getting all excited about it. I think the fact it's only 12 inches and you still got to roll to hit as well is quite interesting. You've got missiles that you can't take invulnerable saves against, and people are getting really intrigued with that. I think for stuff like Leviathans, those kind of, if those weapons are around, and it just makes people think about how many Leviathans do I take? I think they're one-use weapons, but still, anything that kind of makes people think about what they're taking a little bit more is good.
It's always good when there's something that is a bit of an easy choice, and suddenly something comes out that completely counters it.
The worry is how it affects other stuff which didn't need to be kind of thought of.
Yeah,
but,
there is that limit, but it's nice when the balance is something switches suddenly, because then those choices then something you have to get rethought.
Yeah,
people have to think about what they're doing.
Games have to do that to rotate things, keep things interesting. The way you go about it is a different question. And I'm not going to get too excited about the rules themselves, because I don't think they're the finished article. Not too worried about that. The fact is, we can use I can use a load of, some more models that I've got sitting around waiting to be built. I can use them in Heresy, so good. That's fine and dandy as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Oh, yeah, I had a message from Andrew Hollis, down under, doing loads of good stuff for the Heresy scene.
My Aussie brother.
Your Aussie brother, indeed. He's got a Kickstarter that he's launched. It's for a model, we'll call it the proper title, a Night House Engineer. which comes in 2 poses, and the idea is one of the poses will be general sale, and the other one will be for event organisers to access as event exclusive models throughout this year.
Cool.
They've got a Kickstarter if you want to go and help it. I'm going to put the links in the show notes, but if you go to Kickstarter and search for 28mm sci-fi Night House Engineer or Oz 30K, it'll probably come up as well. Then you can go and see if you want to support that, but I'll put that in the show notes as well. For a fairly quiet period in the build up to the Weekender, there's quite a lot of stuff there, which is good. One thing we still haven't had is any form of schedule for the Weekender. Like nothing.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, like, we normally don't get the full thing till just before, but we've had nothing.
They sometimes start talking about it, don't they? And start telling us about certain people that are definitely going. And
yeah, and I wonder. Yeah, and that's interesting. And I'm sure it's going to be fine. But it is, but yeah, certainly something that I know a few people are starting to get a bit like, come on, where is it? Where is it? We're like, 15 days away from it or something, 14 days away from it. I don't know when it is. Yeah, we're not far. We're just 2 weeks, pretty much 2-3 weeks. So come on, give it to us. That's what we want, isn't it? We're really
definitely
looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, no, exciting.
Excellent. Oh, did you just want to? We did have one other thing, didn't we? You've been playing with some paints.
Yes. I think I may have mentioned these a while ago.
Yeah.
And I think we definitely spoke about them on the podcast. But I've been playing around with some different paints of late, and I thought it was probably a good time to talk about them. So I've been using the Warcolours set of paints for a lot of my stuff recently. And I initially purchased a load and contacted the guy. I think he's a guy in Greece somewhere who makes all of these. Said I really like them, and I asked him if he could send you some to try out. So I got a package through of some bits and pieces, sent them over to you so you could have a little look at them. But I think we spoke about these before, being obviously quite useful. I mean, they're a very cool set of paints because they're labelled in a very sensible way. There's no crazy names. It's red, blue, green, dark blue, etc. So they're all very, very simple. And then he numbers the colours depending on how light they are. So you have red, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which then obviously makes blending the colours very, very easy because he's broken a lot of the stages up. So you haven't got to do much mixing at all. But one of the key things with these paints is that they're gel-based. And they behave very differently to all the other paints I've used in the past. And I think you came across this, didn't you, when you had a little play with them yourself?
Yeah, I kind of unscrewed it and dropped a bit out, and it just sat there on my wet palette like as a lump. And I was like, right, okay. So yeah, it felt much more like I'd gone and bought some artist paint, and then you have to then work with a consistency to get what you want to paint.
Yes, and that's very much how they sort of act, and they've got this sort of lumpy consistency to them where you put them down and they sort of sit as a blob. They dry particularly slowly, so obviously I found that I don't even need to use my wet palette anymore.
Sure,
I'm back to using my tile because where I put a blob on the tile, they'll last about an hour or so. Or even longer, just sitting there, and I can just keep going back to them. So that's very useful. But they do take a little bit longer to dry on the model. But I've found that because they've got this, I can't even know how to describe the consistency really, because it is like a thicker consistency to them. And obviously you thin them down with a bit of water or a bit of medium. That I find them easier to work with, and that they don't seem to, where other paints, if I thin them down, I find that the colours sort of go grainy, and and I have to be careful how I use them. These ones I find a little bit more forgiving, so I find them a little bit easier to blend with. And I find that obviously I've been using the ones that are just, I think, the standard, what they call layer paints, a bit I imagine like the GW range.
Yeah.
And I haven't used the base range that he's created, but they do take a lot of coats to get a solid coat of a colour. So you have to work with it a lot more. But that does mean that obviously that makes blending a lot easier because you can apply a few layers, and then you only then start to see the transition. So you're not sort of, I find that sometimes it's very easy to go down the route of, if it's too opaque, you put the colour down and then you end up with a very banded stage.
Sure,
because, the colour's so opaque that there's no transition between the two, between your two applications, so you see a very definite line. Whereas obviously if something's a little less opaque, you can sort of blur that by applying it several times in different areas, and you can create a nice transition. So I do find them a little bit easier to work in that regards. And also the colours are very, very vibrant. So he hasn't really gone for a subtle pastel range of colours that you sometimes see in some of the other brands. Even GW obviously have quite a lot of subtle colours here and there. They're all quite bold colours. So you've got, I'm using a lot of the turquoise at the moment for the Dark Elder, and the blue-grey, which is obviously what I'm using for my white, and the reds for the cape. But they're very, very bright. So for that style of painting, with the sort of the heavier metal style of bright colours on a model, they work extremely well. For your more subtle shades, you're going to have to do some mixing. You're going to have to maybe change how you use them. So I can imagine for heresy things, Blood Angels, it'd be very good because the reds would be nice and vibrant. Ultramarines, if you want a really vibrant blue, that would be really useful. However, if you're trying to do something maybe a little bit more subtle, I'm trying to think of a different one of the different legions that you may have that have got slightly more subtle colours. You might struggle. If you're trying to do some Death Guard and you wanted to make it look really sort of earthy and colours like that, they're not really suited to that. They're much more brightly coloured. So they're very interesting. I found them really, really good fun to work with, and I ordered some more recently because where I've got a limited palette of colours, I suddenly started thinking, well, if I want to, I wanted to paint something that was more of a sort of, your natural grey colours. So you're more sort of like, grey tones. I didn't have that. I had the blue grey set and the warm grey set, and that's sort of almost like a browny grey and a blue grey, and I wanted it to be more cold. So, sure. I've had to order some different colours. So I'm obviously expanding my range, but I have found them to be really, really nice to work with. And even when I sort of switched back where I didn't have these colours, and I thought, oh, it's fine, I'll just pick up my Citadel colours. I put some I think it was some Administration grey on the palette and started working with it. And suddenly I could really notice the difference and found it very, very hard to get the paint to behave how I wanted it to. So, they take a bit of getting used to, but when you do get used to them, I find them really, really useful. And he's got a full range. He's got a nostalgia range of all the old 80s colours.
Right.
He's got inks. There's obviously the base colours, which I haven't tried yet. There's obviously washes that he's got. So there's quite a lot of different things you could, different things he's gone into. I mean, I think I haven't even scratched the surface yet of all the different products.
It's definitely one of those things. If you're into your painting, I almost immediately I was like, right, I don't think this product's for me. I'm sitting here, my quest this year is to get armies painted, is to look for a way to do achieve what I want to achieve in a reasonable time. And for me, that becomes, right, that's the paint I'm using. Don't have to touch it. It's out, water it down just a smidge, off you go. Boom, paint the model. And immediately I was like, okay, I'm going to have to learn how this paint works.
Yes, completely,
and even then I'm going to have to be aware every time I get it, because I have to work the paint. Whereas I know that if I drop some Vallejo or some GW out, I can be like, boom, boom, okay, smidgen of water, that's going to be right. And away I go. And part of that's because I've used them before. Part of it is just they just take less work. They're closer to use out of the pot than these ones. But I can see, as I say, the colour range is strong. The colours are strong. I can see them having a use, absolutely. Just maybe not for me. Or the way I could potentially see myself using them is if I do, say, a Blood Bowl team, and I know there's a limited number of dudes I'm going to be doing, and I want to maybe do something a little bit better. That's something I could see me do.
I think they're definitely a painter's paint, if that makes sense, because I think the way that they're arranged with the colour numbering system with, like, the turquoise 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and a transparent and a white and a black, and how it comes in sets like that, means that most times if you were painting that colour, you wouldn't want that many steps, even if you were just applying each one of those. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going backwards and forwards between, I'll start at 3 and then I'll go back to 5 and I'll go up to 1 and then I'll go in between with a 2 and then I'll go, and I'm going backwards and forwards constantly. So I'm doing them. I'm using all of the colours in every sitting. Whereas if you're looking to get an army done, you might say, well, I want that red, but then I want one highlight on that, and then I want to just wash it, and then I want to move on to the next colour. It's not, all those colours maybe don't add anything to your painting as such, if you see what I mean. So I think they are a painter's paint. If you want to try and really, you want to try something, and you want to get a particular technique, or if you want to try and really hone in on your blending, I think they really do help.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that's all for the start of the show. We'll go into our interview with David, and we'll come back at the end and close it all out. Well, joining me once again, we have Mr. David Brains. Hello, sir.
G'day, Greg. Are you well?
I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's really great to come on and have a good chat with you.
No, you're more than welcome. So we're, just for those who aren't fully aware, can you tell us what you do in the Heresy?
Oh, yes. Well, my name's David Brains, and I'm the guy behind the 30K channel, which has been running for about 2 years now. And my aim is to produce, fingers crossed, the best 30K battle reports on the internet. So I'm striving for that perfection, to quote the Third Legion. But I'm getting close. We've got some really great guys helping me at the moment, producing the games and doing some editing, and got another presenter, which is fantastic. So we're trying our best to showcase the best of the Heresy, I guess. Yeah,
and that's top quality production, good looking armies, and packaging it in a way that screams quality as well. The best is always a subjective thing, isn't it? But,
of course.
You choose what you do and you do it well, and I really enjoy it. I know a lot of people do. You can go and find. You put just to kind of get this out there. You put how many games do you put on YouTube? Is it?
Yeah, I started off YouTube, and then from there, which was one game a month. That's all I could manage, and then I kind of needed to generate a little bit of money. So then I went to a sort of a pay-per-view service alongside the free access from YouTube, and that I think I was doing 3 games a month then, and then that went really, really well, and it allowed me to build a website. So last year, my commitment for subscribers was to produce 4 Heresy games a month, which is no mean feat, I can tell you. And then this year it will be 4 Heresy games and Adeptus Titanicus. So it's 5 games, essentially of Heresy, because AT is set in the Heresy era, a month. So it's quite an undertaking, I can assure you. But that's my commitment to the subscribers, is 5 games a month, and the 1 free game a month still goes out on YouTube every month, and they're kind of like the back catalogue almost.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can go and try it out on YouTube, or there's a free trial on the website, isn't there? Or there certainly used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can still go to the website, which is the 30kchannel.com, and there is a 7-day free trial, and you have access to every single game I've produced right through to the ones last week and last month. So you can definitely get a taste. And then if you're keen, you can subscribe, which obviously helps the channel out massively. So, please go and do it. I beg you.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's been a while, you've been on the show before, I wanted to talk about that, because we just covered there. There's change. You've changed, since back in the day when we first talked about it before I came up. How you're saying it's going very well. That extra recording and all that takes out of you, having been up there and gone through it. I can see like kind of the effort that goes in just on the day, and then appreciating the fact that audio editing is about 4 times as quick as video editing. That's a lot of work you're putting in on what you're doing.
Yeah, it is, and you know what? I don't think a lot of people realise that. I think they just no disrespect to them, but some of the comments I get are like, you know, oh, you could have done that better, you could have done this better. But it's really difficult. And you, was it your friend Dan? Dan Como, wasn't it? Your friend? Yeah. So you and Dan came up, and you know, the day is long, but prior to that, it's organising 2 people, organising lists, talking about missions and scenarios. So that takes place over 2-3 weeks, sometimes months. Then the guys come up, fill the game. That's 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours, and then you guys go home, and then the kind of the magic happens after that. You know, the editing and the matching of music and the credits and that sort of thing. So it is a really long process, and as you know yourself, I'm not stood there with a camera phone, just, you know, recording and documenting your game. There's, you know yourself, I have a particular process, and a lot of it sometimes doesn't make sense on the day, but when it's all rammed together, edited together, it does work. And the one of the thing I'm most proud of the channel is the consistency of the game. You know, they all follow a very, very similar a similar continuity, I guess, and you know, when I talk to these people on internet, on messaging and through email, it's really hard to understand if they're going to very eloquently describe their turn. So I kind of have, you know, processes in place that kind of helps them through that process. So my thought is always towards the viewer. I want them to watch one of the games that we produce, and so they can understand exactly what's happening through the whole game, and I don't want them to be lost. And so the reason why I have that process, and the reason why the effort goes in is to make sure that the viewer always understands exactly what's going on. They get a picture of the battlefield. The person that's narrating their turn is done in such a way that the person viewing knows exactly what's going on. So it's all geared towards the customer at the end of the day, and it does take a lot of time and effort, but it does bug me sometimes that people don't understand that process, and my reaction to them is always, hey, when you're ready, bring your army, get a game on the channel and understand the process. And I've had a few people in the past that have come on and they've gone, wow, yeah, you know, it's a hell of a day, a hell of a process, and they kind of get it in the end. But sometimes it's hard to convey that, isn't it, for a game, because I think you do it in 20 minutes and it's a really easy thing, and it's quite difficult in the end. I
think anything where all the work is hidden, and the idea is with that, and with podcasting, I say, I listen to a lot of podcasts about creating product via podcast or video before I started, and they were talking about a minimum of 4-to-1 video to audio editing and stuff like that. And because you're sitting there and you're editing, it's not like you're taking a video and removing a couple of mistakes. You're putting lots of different bits together. And I tell you what, for people who've never been on, you know, people say, "Oh yeah, Greg, you're a podcaster. You can go and do that." Well, actually, it's a whole different thing. You know, I can come and talk on here. I'm also in control of the pause button and everything else. and I know this is my environment. This is what I've done.
Sure.
I watched the video of myself and Dan playing and was like, yeah, I kind of wish that first one was our second attempt at it, because now I know what's expected, and I feel like I would be better if I did it again.
You're welcome back any time, Dan. You're welcome back any time. You know that.
I had to paint my army up a bit better. I think they don't want to get embarrassed. Some of the armies that are on there, but yeah, it's a really interesting process to be part of. And you're putting a lot of effort in, and you do get detractors online, and that's part of the job, isn't it? We know that as soon as you put yourself out there, people are going to comment, and the only way you can really deal with it is the way you are. To be honest, you've got to open up and say, "Cool, well, you know, come along and help me out, make it better." Carry on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that the problem is, Greg, is that people have always got their own idea about how they would like to watch a game, and I guess it's for me to not to be everything to everyone, because if I did, then the games would just be so wild. So I kind of have to say, look, this is what I can do. This is my method. Because if you try to cater to everyone and everything, you just won't manage it. So you kind of just have to say, look, this is the way it's going to happen. This is the way we're doing it, and hope that people like it. And I think on balance, but I hate to sound arrogant here, but I think I do a reasonable job. That I watch a lot about reports in my spare time between everything else. And some people do things really well, and some people don't do so well. But I think it's because it's so important to me to showcase the best of this hobby. My mantra is I always try to do the best that I can, and with the best equipment that I can get. And I think that hopefully that comes through with the quality and the consistency. And it's really hard to maintain that. And I just don't think people realise it so much. But I would encourage anybody to grab a camera phone or to grab a DSLR or something and shoot a video and just see what goes into it. Because when you film a game, it's not just capturing people's turns. It's all about trying to frame the shot and making sure that, after someone has described their movement phase, that the viewer knows exactly where that Sakari is versus the fire actor, or where that 10-man tactical squad started and where they ended, or, so it's a difficult thing. But, hopefully the format that I've picked, the way we produce the show works, and I think it does to a degree. I really do.
Yeah, and there are other people doing other types of videos out there at the end of the day. So if people don't like your style, they can go elsewhere and see the style they want, and vice versa. I must admit, battle reports. I'm not a huge battle report consumer like a lot of people are. I've tried free trials with other well-known battle report people and stopped pretty much immediately because they don't do things the way I'd want them to be done. It's the little things as well. Like we all play the Heresy. We know the Heresy isn't the most streamlined game in the world and never will be. So you've got rules disputes that occur online. You've got to make those decisions in playing your game. You've also got to remember every single rule that happens, and people are coming on, and it's hard enough sometimes just remembering your own rules when you've been playing the army for a while. When you're bringing in a newer army, and also misspeaking. The amount of times I misspeak and say the wrong name, the wrong number, or what have you, and it's so much more glaring when you're putting it out online.
Yeah, it's really difficult because when I play quite fast, and I play against people that are kind of very similar, and we can go through a turn without really talking. We just roll dice, we know what numbers come up. But when you have to then step back and think, right, how am I going to tell thousands of people out on the internet what I'm doing? It's really difficult. And when I've filmed a few games with Dan Porter, when we did some of the initial AT games, I mess up all the time. I pronounce stuff wrongly, and I say, I need 3s to hit, and I roll 2 2s, and I go, oh great, I've got 3 3s, and it's so difficult to talk through your turn. And also as well, a lot of people, when they talk through the turn, they personalize it. They go, I moved that squad over there. Well, if I'm painting and having the channel in the background, I have no idea what's going on. So you then have to remove yourself from it by saying the Ultramarine Tactical Squad, equipped with the Flamer, move forward towards the Death Guard Grave Warden squad. So it's really hard to get into that mindset. But you notice a lot of the games that we film, the first couple of turns are a little bit dicey. They're a little bit nervous, but once they get into that third person speaking, it runs away, and it's brilliant. But and then when you get guys back that have done the second and third games, they just crack it every time, and it's brilliant to see. It's fantastic, but it's hard to get into that mindset.
Yeah, it's not natural.
No,
for the way we play games. Have you found that when you're getting two guys who've been on a number of times, have you found that everything is that much quicker, that much smoother, or are you still taking the same amount of time, but it's saving you editing time, things like that?
Yeah, I think that's the crucial thing. The games more or less take the same. there has some times I've been there for 12 hours filming, because some people just don't get it, and I completely understand that. But in the end, we work through it and we get the game done in the end. But that's where it really helps me out, is the editing side, when a turn goes really smoothly and I don't have to edit stuff out. One of the biggest problems I have is when people talk, they pause quite a lot between sentences, so they're waiting for the camera to perhaps catch them up to go on to their next unit to review, but the camera is a lot faster than they are, and they pause, and I have to edit those pauses out, and sometimes I can remove 15, probably that's a bit excessive, 8 minutes of pauses, and it takes a long time. Sometimes I've had games that take much longer to edit than they do actually to film. So a great example, and I hope he won't mind me talking about him. There's a guy called Curtis Spears. He's got a Death Guard. I think he's American, but if he's Canadian, I apologise. But I think he's American. I always get the two mixed up. But he has a beautiful voice. It's absolutely amazing, and he knows his rules and he knows his Legion really well. And I think he's been on twice now. Yeah, I think he's been on twice, and he's just so good. He's just bomb, and it's done. And he's got a really rich voice. And I've had a couple of requests from people who've emailed me and said, this guy's voice is great. Get him back on. But there's loads of guys that are really, really good. But he's just perhaps one I picked out from the air. But yeah, it helps me out immensely when people know their rules. They can talk through a turn quite eloquently and deliver the facts, because that's what people need. People need a little bit of feeling. I'm quite an emotional player, so I'll get really, really excited and really passionate about a game. But ultimately, people want facts, don't they? This unit moved there, and then we kind of include a little bit of towards the end of each turn, they get a review, don't they? They say, I had a really bad turn here. This hasn't happened for me, or this was really great. And that's where we inject the passion there. But during the rest of the turns, we just need fact. This unit moved forward, shot 20 bolt rounds, 10 hits, 2 wounds, killed 2 Terminators, whatever. That's what we need. And we need those facts delivered in a timely and efficient and eloquent fashion. And it's my job, I guess, to drag that out of the people, because a lot of people I haven't met before, or I've casually chatted to them online, but it's different when you're face to face. You've got the camera on, the lights are on, and it's the pressure's there. So it's my job to kind of drag that out of them. But we get it in the end, and I think it works. But that's all down to the process. So
it is, and yeah. And for those who've never been, David gets quite work-like, which you have to. We appreciate. But there were a couple of times I'd turn around, I was like, "Whoa, okay." But it's about, if you're not like that, then things take longer and everything else. So it's completely understandable. Just again, it took my brain a second to kind of click in. Yeah, no, fair play, and being able to talk smoothly, eloquently, without the ums, ahs, or pauses. I'm a big pauser, and I say a few ums and ahs. I've listened to Carl Tuttle on the Independent Characters talks about he won't edit now, and if you want to come on and do that, that's fine. There's a balance for me. I find that particularly when I get other people on, if they have a tick they're not used to being on a podcast, I feel like I want to protect them a little bit. Because, for me, it's fine. I'm on this with 106 shows or whatever. People are used to the fact that I have these little breaks, like you can hear me doing now. Yeah, they're there in my speech pattern, and there's a few ums, fine, whatever. But every now and then I still take some of them out, and you're right. You go through and you save X amount of minutes per however long you've recorded, but it takes a long time to do it.
Yeah, it's and like I said, when we get guys that come back and they know the drill, and it makes the day so much easier. And also I think as well, when I watch the games back, although I don't watch them back that often, I do, but every so often I do. You can definitely tell their first game to their second or third game, and it makes me really proud that they come back and they get it and they enjoy it as well. Because I think the first game that we film with people is quite nervous, and it can get a little bit stressed in there. You know yourself, it gets quite warm, and when you're playing a game, your legion's on the line and you want to represent your legion well, and it can get a little fraught in there, and that's why we go out for lunch and cool down, have something to eat, and have a good chat about stuff. But yeah, definitely the second, third game's the charm. It works really well.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that's kind of the process you're going through. How is it being? So we've got the Adeptus Titanicus aspects of the show now, one a month.
Yeah.
And you've pulled in resources from elsewhere to help with that. How is it handing that over?
Oh, it's pain. Well, it's not. No, it's not painful. No, it's like giving away your firstborn, isn't it? I don't have children, but I can only imagine. I was really, really lucky. I had two people in mind that I wanted to produce the games. One guy was keen in the end, but he then stepped back and said, look, I don't think I can give you the time. And I said, look, I totally respect that. No worries. And then I spoke to Dan, and he was well up for it. And I was absolutely overjoyed. And Dan has done an absolutely spectacular job. And I'm so pleased that he's done it. He's obviously he's on Phosphex Party as well, another podcast. He does a great job with that. But it's a bit unfair at the moment because Dan's only filmed. He's filmed a couple of games on the channel, and him and I have done the first Adeptus Titanicus game. But since then, he's filmed 2 other AT games, which are in the process of being edited. So the next AT game, solely hosted by Dan, should come out tomorrow, I think. Well, it doesn't matter. I guess this will go out in the future, but it would have been out by now, and the next one's due in February. So really excited to watch those games back because I haven't actually watched any of them yet. So yeah, but I've been there a couple of times when he's been filming, and he does a great job. So I'm so pleased to have Dan on board. So it's great news.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed the first one. Looking forward to it. And Adeptus Titanicus is fast becoming a favourite game of mine, and it's interesting to see kind of what other people are doing and how they're playing, and to see some cool battle reports as well. And it's really cool to see the expansion. So obviously you've got a number of shows. You've got four a month and AT.
Yes, and
you're managing a full-time job and a relationship and trying to get games in yourself. You've grown. How's that? I mean, obviously this is a hobby that you enjoy as well.
Sure.
Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. But
I'm not going to lie, it's extremely stressful. To date, it's cost me a job and a girlfriend.
Oh wow!
So it's not been. I've had a very rocky year. But the problem is, well, it's not a problem at all. The thing is, I have people paying me money every month, and they expect what I promised them, and that is the center of my world. I think upsets me the wrong word, but it bothers me if I don't get a game out on time.
Sure.
Or if I get lots of cancellations, it puts my schedule back. Before Christmas, I was in a really great position. I had loads of games done, edited, ready to go. Then I had a couple of cancellations, and it messes my whole schedule up. So it can be extremely stressful. So and unfortunately, a couple of big things in my life have departed, and I've put the channel first. But I think if you're taking money off people, you have to deliver, and that is my absolute priority. I take that extremely seriously, and everything I do, particularly last year and going forward for at least the first 6 months of this year, will be solely providing that content. And I want to provide more content as well. I have some really crazy ideas that no one's done yet that I really want to put into practice and get them out, and at least film a couple of tester shows and see the results. So I'm quite excited about that. But yeah, AT is I was quite, I wouldn't say resistant to doing AT, but I knew I could see it was going to be popular. There was a massive appetite for it in the community, and I knew AT had to be done, but I knew I couldn't deliver it myself. And if I did, it would be a half-assed effort, if I'm honest, because I am so stretched with everything else. So I knew Dan or someone had to do it for me. And as I said, the second game will go out very soon. Well, we've been out by now by the time this goes to air, but I think it's a really great opportunity, and it is heresy based. I didn't want to do it if it was set in the 40k, because I have a deep passion for 30k. I think it's an amazing environment and a story arc, and I'm so pleased it was in the 30k universe, I guess. Yeah, it is tough. It is tough, and after we've had a little chat here, I've got stuff to edit, and I'm trying to improve my Final Cut experience. which isn't easy. It's like an old dog, new tricks. I'm desperately trying to learn new techniques and new angles and new bits and bobs and some stuff. But I should also mention as well, if you don't mind, there's a young lad called Boris Herzog. He lives in Cambridge, and he is exclusively editing Adeptus Titanicus. So it's purely cool. Dan and Boris doing AT. I don't have anything to do with it. I build the boards, but that's about it.
Sure.
And provide the scenery. And Boris, his profession is video editing, and he has done some amazing things with the AT games, and he's got some fantastic ideas, and he's working really closely with Dan to produce the best AT games. And you may have seen that we put the Titan card, the console, on screen, and show those plasma markers and all the damage, and no one else has done that so far because. They do it, but they pan across the board, talk about what's happening, then they pan down to the thing, then they get their big fingers in the way and they move these markers. I think the consoles are quite clumsy, actually. I magnetised mine and they're a lot better, but Boris has completely digitized that whole console with all the elements that go in it. So when he edits a game, he builds all of those elements in Photoshop, and then he overlays them over the top of the editing software, over the footage. And they're a lot crisper, and they're really beautiful, and they work so well. And no one else has done that. And that's definitely the ethos of the channel, is to do stuff that people haven't done before in a way that's, again, it goes back to the viewer. I want the viewer to know, I want the viewer to watch the game and learn how to play it as well, because we've all been playing Heresy for years and we're well versed in it. And then a new game turns up and we're like, oh God, we've got to learn a new game, a new system. And if we can help people navigate their way through the console and learn how to play a game through the games, then it's serving a second purpose. It's not only is it entertainment, it's education at the same time, isn't it? And that's fantastic.
Yeah, and if you're doing a top quality product, or you want it to be top quality, then that all folds into that. If Adeptus Titanicus comes out and you're the first person to get a game up 5 days later, then that's a different experience, and you can get away with those kind of things, and it's more of that feel. But and I must admit, I like the overlays for Adeptus Titanicus. I thought it was I'm not, simple's the wrong word, but it's an elegant way of doing things. In the as you say, you don't have to come away from the action; it's all just there for you. And comes up, which is good. And they're doing well. I say I've only watched the one so far, but it looks really good.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the first game, which is just the Warlords and the Knights, I filmed that one entirely, and the way I did the overlays was that we took footage. We took actual video footage of the consoles, and then we counted 3 seconds with the pip in place. Then we counted another 3 seconds, and we moved the pip and recorded that. And then it was all done on green screen with film. And then when I put it in editing, I then got rid of the green screen and I overlaid it. And it took quite a long time. But because Boris is, it's not cool. It took ages. But Boris has built all of the consoles in Photoshop, and he's done so much more work. And I know that the first game took him nearly 20 hours to edit, because he has to build all of the things in. So hopefully going forward that'll be a lot faster, but I know he spent 20 hours on it, which is a long time, but it's all for the viewer. And
hopefully over X amount of games he'll have made that time back.
Oh, I have no doubt. Exactly. Boris is extremely professional and knows exactly what he's doing, and all the hard graft is done now. All the consoles are built, everything's all scanned in, it's all been digitized. All he does is have to quickly build them, and then he can overlay them, and it'll be a lot faster. But I don't think people realise how long that process took to do. And poor lad, he's got a full-time job, a girlfriend, and then he's got to spend 20 hours putting consoles together. The poor bloke. But again, it's all for the viewer.
The things we do for our hobbies, eh?
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Brilliant. So that's Adeptus Titanicus. On the 30k side of things, we've got, you're actually doing, so you kind of got standard games in there, if you want, inverted commas, where you're playing like 2,500 points or whatever on 6x4 table, very recognisable. You've also got the Challenge the Channel.
Yes.
And this is, again, it's something that's a little bit different. and a little bit different within the heresy kind of sphere. It's a weird sphere we've got in that there's definitely an element of, and I'm one of these people, I really enjoy a good old toe-to-toe game every now and then, and no holds barred, let's give it. But it's almost frowned. It's not necessarily frowned upon, but sometimes when you put something out, it feels like people are like, oh, should you be doing that? And what you've got here is a direct challenge, Zone Mortalis, your Iron Hands that you had done.
I was so pleased. There's a guy called Ben Pointer. I'm pretty confident he's a Golden Demon winner. I'm sure he is. And we were chatting, and he agreed to paint the Iron Hands for me, and he did an absolutely spectacular job. I love him, absolutely love him. It was only a small force. It's only it's 45 Iron Hands Immortals, a Praetor, all take more, and 2 Contemptors. So it was quite a small force for him to do, but he did a superb job. And the Challenger Channel thing came about because Zone Mortalis is probably my favourite game. I absolutely love it. And the board from Forge World just provides such an unparalleled environment to play in, and it's so fun. A lot of the games on the channel, they are the lists are quite well manicured. The missions are talked about in advance, and the worst thing for me on a standard 6x4 game is that it kind of ends turn 2, turn 3, because the viewer has paid some money and they want a full 5 or 6 turns. They want a great close game that's a lot of to and fro, and that does happen a majority of the time. But sometimes we do get games that finish quite quickly. But that sometimes is a pairing. Sometimes some legions lend themselves to very short games. They either go all or nothing, and sometimes they win, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the pendulum does swing, and we do get slammed for that. But I've had games against guys at my local club where I've lost on turn 1 or turn 2, and we've all had games like that. And I think it's the channel's responsibility to showcase those games. Yes, people feel they've been a bit robbed or they've been a bit cheated. They've paid their money and they've all of a sudden had a game that's lasts 30 minutes and it's game over. But if I were to manicure games too much, it's not a true reflection of the games that people play at home. And I think the challenge was a way to kind of address that. I send out a little pack to everybody that wants to try the challenge and say, look, I need your toughest, most, smashing list that you can produce, because, you've got to get from one side of the board to the other in a short space of time through these units that are quite good. I could have done a lot more. I could have put apothecaries in them, and I could have done a little bit more and made them super hard. But you don't want to make something that's completely that will win every time. So the challenge of the channel is a way to get tough, very focused lists, and they are short format as well, which is great. So that kind of addresses that, hopefully. And it's been reasonably successful. I don't want to give the results away, but it's only been managed a couple of times, so it's a tough prospect, and you get a lot of guys that come on and think they can do it, and it's definitely a challenge, as the name suggests.
Yeah, and I think it's quite refreshing to see an outlet online that is unashamedly got a competitive element to it. Yeah, it's still done in the same way. You're still having fun with your opponent, but it is laying down that challenge. It is come and beat me, not come and the primary goal is come and beat me. Obviously, for your challenge, you still want it to be entertaining, but yes. But the primary goal is come and beat me. So I think it's quite refreshing to see that, and there's lots of scope going forwards. I'm sure there's lots of people lining up. I'm sure there's lots of people going, yeah, I could beat that easily. Well, and that's the whole idea, isn't it? Put your hand up, send an email, counter that, and look forward to. Obviously, we're going to run for a little time with what you've got, but pushing on to the future, there's loads of scope with that as well. That's really cool, really enjoyable. Have you found? Is there anything else specifically about the channel you want to talk about?
I guess the only thing is that I always need people to come on. I'd like to think it's an experience. It's definitely an experience. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not sure. But we get a lot of people coming back. But I always want the channel to showcase the best, and whether that's people or their armies, but just really well painted, well constructed armies that want to have a go. Then please email me, message me, get in touch, because producing 5 games a month, that's 10 opponents I have to find every month, and people have got diaries and to sort out, and they've got wife and kids and work and commitments, and I can book 6 months in advance if it helps. But I just need people to come on, and I want them to have the experience, and it's a nice thing as well. If you filmed a game, it's something you can look back on. It's a record of your game, and Chris Gibson, a friend of mine, he's been on a couple of times. He's got Alpha Legion. He's doing Sons of Horus at the moment, and lots of people collect lots of different armies, and it'd be really great to, we've had his Alpha Legion on, and then we'll get his Sons of Horus on in the future, and it's good to just document those people and their games and their progression with the armies, and it's a really, really great thing. And I'm hoping to get Chris on in June. I think we're chatting to him at the moment about getting a game on in June, July, maybe, with his Sons of Horus. But yeah, just get in touch, and I'll always try and match you with someone of similar ability or similar lists. And I've actually formed a little Facebook page with people, I think I've got to most people that have been on the channel, and then they've done it before, they've got the experience, they've got the army that we want, and then we'll try and pair games through there. And also, if I get dropouts like I did towards the end of last year, it's really difficult for me to remember everyone. I get lots of emails every day, and I get some guys saying, "Oh, do you remember me? I sent you an email 6 months ago." And I'm really sorry, I've been so busy I forgot. So I put the people into this group now, and then I say, look, a slot has come up, or I need a game for this date. Can anyone make it? Is anyone interested? And so that will help me out massively. I hate to admit it, Greg, but I'm a little bit unorganised. I've got a lot going on, and hopefully this website will address that. But
tell me about it. I know
it's just
that
so
pain.
much to manage, isn't it? So much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm not the best managing kind of what I'm doing anyway. Ask my wife that. She regularly has a go at me for being disorganised. But yeah, absolutely. And when I came up, Dan, a friend from the club, good friend of mine, has got a nice looking army as well. So there is the ability to do that, to go with someone as well if they're talking to you. And the thing is to open the channel with you and to discuss and go through that process. Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff going on. It really is an experience. It was really enjoyable.
I'm pleased.
And it's a very different, as you say, it's a very different experience. But it does open things up as well. One thing about being part of anything like this is we go to tournaments and we meet people. When you do a podcast, when you're even just part of a podcast or part of a show or something like that, that opens up sometimes a completely different audience as well. Because unless you've got, I've got the podcast and I've gone to Adepticon and LVO and what have you, through Age of Sigmar, I've done stuff in America. But if you don't get the opportunities to do that, then sometimes this allows people to really connect with you as well. And there's kind of, that's not the reason to do it. It's a byproduct of doing it, which can be really cool. I know one of the biggest things for me doing this podcast is kind of all the people I've met, all the things I've done that are opened up just because I chose to, voice my opinion online. It's crazy, really, isn't it? I was like the first kind of heresy one to get round to doing it. Not necessarily the best, but I was out there and no one had any choice. If you wanted to listen to Heresy Podcast, you had to listen to me, bless them.
Good on you.
But yeah, it opens, it creates a thing, and it's always good to be part of. And I know, obviously for you, as you say, you've had some changes in your life, but that obviously shows how important this is to you. And I know I've had discussions with various people about, your wife lets you do this, and I'm like, well, if if she didn't let me do things or what have you, or if work got in the way, then actually, I would look for a different job as well. Because this is important to me and I get a huge amount out of it. And everyone's got to balance their life up. But for me, this is where I draw the line and how I want to continue.
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt that that people that do podcasts or that do battle reports or do other things in the community, it does take a lot of their time. And I think it's really good that if you can combine a passion and a job at the same time, or not necessarily a job because it's not a full-time job for me, but if you can do those two things, do something you're passionate about, I think it comes through in the product that you make, and people can see your enthusiasm and they're drawn to it. And I've made some really amazing friends and connections with people doing this, and it's such a great thing, and we're so lucky to have this hobby. It's such a rich environment, and the people that create it at Forge World are, they've created this whole fictional thing that thousands of us around the world just completely love and adore, don't we? And if I can have that little slice with the channel and show my appreciation for it, and hopefully I do it justice, then that's good enough for me, and I think people like us, I guess, providing a service or providing a showcase of the hobby, it will inevitably recruit more people, and it will encourage them to, I've not really thought of a Sons of Horus army or a Night Lords army or a Mechanicum army. Maybe I'll give that a go. And all it does is good, because it promotes it and it gets people interested, and it perhaps highlights something they haven't considered before, and it just keeps the hobby going. One thing that really, really infuriated me about last year was all this heresy's dead business, and you know what, it really isn't. If you're hashtagging heresy's dead, it only propagates the same feeling, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? And
I completely
it just
agree.
it just really infuriated me. And I know, I think it got to a point where it was a bit of a laugh, heresy's dead, smiley face, whatever, but it just does the hobby no good, and it's just the naysayers getting on board. And I just think it's crazy, because it's alive and well. It's alive through podcasts, it's through battle reports, it's through thousands of people every week meeting at local clubs, playing games, chatting. There's a little group. I say a little group. I don't really know actually, but there's a couple of guys in London from the Crusade and Heresy Facebook page, like Lex and a few other guys, and they meet up and they sit in a pub and just talk about heresy. And that's fantastic. And I think we do it all over the country, don't we? All over the world, we get together, and if we're not playing games or watching videos or listening to podcasts, we're talking about our favorite characters, or we're talking about lists. And if you look at the activity on Facebook and Instagram, the images and the conversations coming out of heresy is fantastic. It will never die. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. I understand that it was a tongue-in-cheek joke. However,
sure,
I think it wore thin, like most memes do, personally. But also, if you're not in on the joke, then all you see is the hashtag, and you take it at face value, and that's fine. I kind of understand why it's there. I didn't really agree with it. I never bought into it. And there are different types of people, and a lot of certain types of people won't listen to my show, and that's fair enough. And they'll have a view on me and whatever, and then certain other people won't listen to other podcasts because they'll have a view on them and not agree with that, and that's good. Yeah. That's good. We've got different content to put out to different types of players. But my thought is, I spend so much time podcasting or playing or building or reading, then. Yeah. Let's be positive about something I spend a lot of my life doing. And again, we said it a number of times. We can still be critical. We can still go to Forger and say, "Come on, dudes! All right, what's going on here?" But
sure.
But when we're in that, let's be positive. Let's build up, because then, as you say, when someone comes along and the first video they see of someone playing Horus Heresy is one of your videos and it's top-notch quality, two people having fun, then that's going to get more people in than two people moaning a bit and making a bit of a half-assed effort at it and making lots of in-jokes. It does, and there's when you provide content, there's a little bit of responsibility there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
is.
I think that's easily forgotten. I'm not whatever news channel you want to. I've dread to name one because people will moan about it. But I'm not. I'm not a reporter who has who's trying to find the truth. That's absolutely not what I am. But I have a voice. However, even if 12 people listening to me, then those 12 people might be influenced by what I say. So we do have a responsibility in that respect. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say one thing. I haven't listened to a lot of podcasts historically, but I have recently. It's definitely piqued my interest, and I've listened to quite a few in the last sort of 6 months, really. I think if you're a particular follower of the show, then you get a lot of the references, you get a lot of the in jokes. But if, like you said, if you are new to something and you don't get it, you can almost feel on the outside. And I do think we have a responsibility to be a little bit family friendly and to not exclude anyone. To a degree, you can't be so clean faced all the time, but I do think we have a responsibility to it, and I do bear that in mind. When we do the pre-game interview, sometimes there's a lot of in jokes between the two people, and I say to the guys, well, it's a great joke between you two, but the thousands of people that watch the show all have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and then it puts them outside of the circle, doesn't it? And it can be a bit exclusive. So we do have a responsibility, but like you said as well, it's also good to stake your claim in the ground, isn't say this is where I stand, this is my opinion. If you like it, great. If you don't, let's talk about it. So it's important. Absolutely.
I think that's probably, unless you want to talk about, we're going into 2019, and I've been talking to a couple of podcasters, and actually that's kind of I was saying, let's do this for 2019. Let's
sure.
Make it the year of heresy, and not because of anything Forge will do, but let's because we can't control what Forge will do.
Absolutely.
So there's no point even trying that. But let's be out there in a positive manner, and let's be active, and let's engage, and let's make the independent community be better by the end of 2019 than it is at the start of 2019. And that's not to say it's in a bad place, but
no, not at all.
Let's just keep pushing forwards. But yeah, so we're in 2019. You've got this channel set up. This year, are you ploughing on? You've got plenty going on. Are you always thinking of more stuff, or are you?
Yeah. The couple of things to take away from last year was that I sold my Mechanicum. I brought a new Mechanicum army. So I've painted one half. I'm halfway through painting the other half, and my plan is to try and get to as many events as I can. I've got a couple booked in at the moment, but I'm still not quite finished painting my army at the moment. But so even if I don't go to an event to play, I just want to go and watch and talk to people, because it's a really great recruiting ground as well. There's a lot of best army competitions, and I go to Warhammer World, not recently, but I try to go as often as I can, and I just watch and listen to games. And if they talk about their turn, and I go, yeah, he's got a nice army, he can talk, brilliant. And then I go approach them and say, hey, But 2019, more games. I'm desperately trying to paint my army. I've been there this afternoon. I've done about 6 hours painting today. I do want to run an event. I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I've been thinking of an event for the last 6 months, and I haven't quite got it in my mind. The event I want to run is extremely complicated and quite a logistical nightmare. So, but I don't know. I've got a few ideas. I need to talk to a couple of people about that. But I would love to run, even if it's one event, then that would be fantastic. I do have a couple of ideas for some games. So not quite a challenge the channel. I'm going to do an escalation thing with a guy called Alistair. He's got a Weiss Guards army. He's been on the channel before. He lives in Birmingham. But he's now doing Sons of Horus. So him and I are going to do a Mechanicum versus Sons of Horus escalation lead. The classic 500 points, Mortalis going up to, incrementally as I paint my tanks and develop my Auto Reductor. So we're going to be doing that. We've booked those dates out already into, I think we've got 4 games booked. My priority this year will be the terrain for Adeptus Titanicus for Dan to game over. That's a massive priority for me. I'm desperately trying to buy up original Forge World products and get them painted. I've done a couple of bits and bobs, but I need to get more scenery for that. I have some amazing ideas. Well, I think they're amazing for boards. I think I'm fairly well known for my boards on the channel, so it's always trying to push the boards and different scenes and bits and bobs we can do. So that's a massive priority for me. And then I have a couple of little extra bits that I would like to do. I did a bit of a post recently about what stuff people would like to see, and that people said they'd really like to see a showcase. So if we get someone on that's got a lovely army, it'd be nice to sit down with them and perhaps spend an hour talking about the fluff behind their army, the reason why they collect, have a look at their models closer up, talk about if they've got any conversions. So that would be a really lovely feature that I'd like to do. But again, I don't know how I'm going to film it. It's all very well 2 blokes sat in front of a table, stuff on the table, and just talk about it. But I don't want it to be that format. I want it to be really different and unique.
Sure.
So there's a couple of things that's rattling around my head that I need to resolve and work out. I desperately need a second camera. That would help out immensely. But the cameras are $1,000 a piece, so it's not easy to raise $1,000, I can assure you. But
no, absolutely.
My main priority will be to move premises. The premises I'm in at the moment costs an absolute fortune, and I need to downsize to kind of cut my overheads in half. So that's going to be done in April. So there'll be a relocation in April, which I need to kind of mastermind, because that's not easy moving all the stuff. But so got a lot going on. But whatever happens, 5 games a month, that's my commitment, and I need to deliver.
man, you got some stuff going on. Well, that's awesome. We're going to have to talk offline about some of that for sure. And I'm sure there's one thing that you've kind of shown is that you get things done with the show. So I have no doubts that you'll work through that list of things, and I'll look forward to watching the results.
It's very kind. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Greg. Cheers.
And joining me now, we have Mr. Laurie Goulding. How are you doing, Laurie?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Excellent stuff. Yes, all good. Thank you very much. We've got you on. For those who don't know, you were what was your kind of role with the Heresy? I know it changed a couple of times, but
yeah. So I mean, I was the lead editor for the Horus Heresy fiction, the fiction side of the series, up until the end of 2016. Which was when I left Games Workshop. But I started, I'm trying to think, oh my God, I started as an editor at Black Library in 2011. And very quickly, it became apparent that my passion and my nerdy fan knowledge was best sort of directed towards this series as opposed to just general like Warhammer 40,000 fiction. So yeah, I was involved with that from quite early on when I started working there. The reason being, I guess, I was a Heresy Uber nerd before I went to work at Games Workshop, and that reputation kind of preceded me a little bit. And I've been heavily involved with a couple of the gaming groups and the working on making campaign events and stuff like that. And we were always doing petitions for Forge World, like, please make Primarchs, please make Space Marine Legions. And not that it massively paid off in the end or anything, but it was very clear that there was a huge community of players, Warhammer players who were desperate to see some sort of gaming come out of the fiction side of things. And I was a very, very vocal and visible proponent of that from the start when I arrived.
I think that's a fair point, actually, and that is part of your story. So what were the groups called? They were... What was-
To begin with, there was I'm going right back to when I first read Horus Rising. So I googled. I was like, oh, I really love to play like some Space Marine Legions. I really want to play with like the World Eaters. I really love Angron and everything. So I googled like pre-heresy World Eaters, and I found this forum like on InVision forums or something, and it was just pre-heresy forums, and it was really like small, janky little community with about 200 members, and I joined that, and then that folded. The guy that founded it just sort of disappeared one day when he hadn't been online for ages, and everyone was like, "Oh no, rally quick! Where should we go?" And a bunch of us formed a second group, which became the Great Crusade forums, and then that grew really fast. We went, I think, over 1,000 members, like within the first year or something.
Cool.
Then towards when I started work, so when was that? Oh my God, I do all the maths in my head now. So yeah, I think it was running for about 4 or 5 years, and then when I started working at Games Workshop, it seemed a bit weird for me to be running a forum dedicated to the fan side of things. So a bunch of the moderators took over and created like a spin-off forum where they kept the old stuff like nested within it, but it was called the First Expedition, and that ran for a long time. I think it's still running now, but again, there was several things I was unable to take part as actively as I had been before due to various things, various contracts and NDAs that had been signed. It didn't seem appropriate. So unfortunately, I had to scale back on that a little bit.
And I think that's an important thing. People might not be aware of that there was a heresy community before there was a heresy gaming system and novels and all that jazz. And you guys were playing at Warhammer World. It's something I didn't really know about because unless you go looking for it, it wasn't obvious, or unless you're at Warhammer World where people are doing it or wherever they're doing it, it's not obvious. And you were making models out of 18 different plastic kits, to try and make one dude who had the right armor marks and all that. It's quite funny.
Absolutely. We were like, go on, sorry.
Yeah, it's just quite funny when you see people now, and there are legitimate concerns and queries people have with Forge World, but some of the old guard are sitting there going, "Oh, you don't know how good you got it." Yeah, but
yeah, the way that we used to justify like which components of which kits we would use was that was a constant topic of contention on the forums originally. Like there was the first thing that I kind of understood, like when I was getting into this the gaming side of things, was the basic Space Marine armor, Mark 7 armor that was in all the plastic kits and most of the metal at that stage, the metal miniatures. That's not appropriate for Horus Heresy, and it's like that armor came about after the Heresy. But then Mark 6, it was like maybe 10% of the miniatures that were in production at that point were Mark 6, and it was like that's fine. So that became like straight away 1/10 of all the tactical squad boxes was like, that's what we want. We want that guy and those components and that helmet, that's spiky shoulder pad and all that stuff. And then finding other little bits and pieces from like the helmets with the kind of the knightly visors, or finding the command squad.
Yeah.
And we'll have the helmets which didn't look like Mark's. So it became much easier to do guys with no helmets, or mixing and matching with some of the Chaos Marine bits, just anything that made it not look like the normal silhouette of Space Marine armor. And there were some guys who, extensively converted from really, really old pieces. And then other guys were just like, you know what? I'm just going to paint up some Mark 7s from this, 40k starter box. I'm just going to paint them in the colors of the Legion. That's fine for me. But it was amazing seeing how pure the purists were and how wide the interpretation of it was. And the other thing was with Terminators, obviously, again, the standard Space Marine Terminators at that time, they were post-Heresy as well. So we had to figure out, okay, how do we make them look pre-Heresy? And it's like, stick some Dreadnought shins on the front of the shoulder pads, that'll be fine. Just anything that changed the silhouette to something, something look a bit like a cataphracti. And people use oil drums or stuff like that to make the barrel-shaped shoulders. And Yeah, it was great fun. There was like, you'd have trading for single components from a kit. You buy a dreadnought just for the shins, like that's the kind of crazy stuff that we were constantly doing. And there was the Bitsbox website where I remember one day they said they sent out like a newsletter and said, we've restocked on Space Marine command squads, and I was like, yep, done. Went in and bought like 10 of the components, and all the other guys in the forum were like, oh, they said they restocked, but then they were immediately sold out. I was like, yeah, sorry, that was me. I bought all that stuff. Not sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's good to show that the differences between the purists and the guys who just want to get in and play and enjoy it, they're still there now. It's
absolutely.
It doesn't change. But we'll move on. We'll get on to books. The one thing you didn't say is you're also an author for some short stories in Heresy as well.
Yeah, and again, like that was something that I kind of. I was a frustrated Black Library submitter before I worked for Black Library. I would constantly, pitch stories, and just like all the other fans, I was just like, oh, I've really got this great idea for a story. I think I'm going to do like a thing where they discover the secret of the 2nd or the 11th primer, all the stuff that you basically know then now, that it's a problem for a submission if it comes straight out of the gate with something that changes the world. And I never understood why. And then when I started working there, Christian Dunn sort of said, yeah, I remember you submitted like last year and the year before. I saw your submission. I recognized your name at the time, but like, why you couldn't pitch those kinds of stories, right? And he just took me through, like, this is what you're looking for when you get these submissions, and like crazy outside the box ideas, and not what you want from somebody who has never been published before. And then very quickly, once I understood that, and I was working as the submissions editor to begin with, I understood like what the formula was for like pitching successfully. And then I started pitching specifically to certain editors, like either to Nick Kime or to Lindsay Priestley or to Christian. And it was like that. I kind of sort of found the very simple way to get ideas accepted through the submissions process, because I understood the submissions process. Yeah. So I was like, I didn't get employed as an author, I didn't get hired to do writing for them, but then very quickly I was like, oh, I can add a little bit of extra value here if I write some stories occasionally. And I've never done any, huge ongoing trilogies or big projects, but lots of little stories here and there, and I think that's certainly the speed with which I write, which is glacially slow. I think it would be a little bit too ambitious to go for anything else beyond that.
Sure, and it's good now as well that some of that information's out there for people who want to find it. There's a lot. Black Library have put information out about how to pitch and kind of what they're expecting, and narrowed the bands and all that jazz. So you've come in. You're in Black Library as an editor. Was this, should we start first off? So you were big into the Horus Heresy before the books came out, I assume, just getting bits of knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because I remembered, I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. I was looking through some stuff that I had in storage, and I found from years and years ago, like well before the novel series, this must have been like 1998 or something like that. I think it was before the Horus Heresy card game even existed, the Sabertooth Games
probably,
thing. Yeah. There was, I had a conversation with one of my friends from high school, and he was trying to get me to basically give a damn about Babylon 5. And he was explaining like the context of it and explaining why he thought it was a great science fiction like setting or like general idea. And he said, whatever you are interested in, if you watch Babylon 5, I'll watch what you're interested in. And I was like, well, I have a thing I've tried to start explaining to him about Warhammer. And I was like, I used to play these games loads when I was younger, and I've kind of drifted away from it a little bit, but like trying to explain Warhammer 40,000 to somebody that has no understanding of it whatsoever, that was an interesting experience. But he showed me like you can't understand Warhammer 40,000 if you don't explain the Horus Heresy. And so I pulled out the board game, the old War Games series board game with all the cardboard tokens, and I was like, we should play this game. And I think about 2 hours of trying to figure out how the game worked later, we were just like, you know what, I'm just going to show you Aliens versus Predator instead. That's going to be easier. So I abandoned trying to convert him to Warhammer. But I realized then, I was like, if you want to understand Warhammer 40,000, you do need to know about the Horus Heresy in some way, even if it's just to explain why the Imperium was so messed up by the time of the 41st millennium. And then, I had the board game, and I've played it a lot since, and played the newer version a lot as well. But that was well before the fiction. And then one day I was like 2005, 2006, I can't remember exactly, and I was in Waterstones, just in the bookshop, and I was like, oh, I wonder if Games Workshop's done any new books lately. And I just saw Horus Rising. I was like, no way, the Horus Heresy, oh my god. And I picked it up, and I was looking at it, I was like, who the heck is Dan Abnett? Like, never heard of this guy. Like, and I opened the first few pages and started reading it. I was like, oh wow, this is really good. Okay, so I bought it immediately and then read it in like 2 days or something. And then, that's when I was like, hey, Angron's awesome. I want to play World Eaters. And followed the series, like, fiercely loyal to the and waiting for every new book and every story to come out, just snapping them up as soon as they arrived, joining the great big community of players and fans at the time.
So at what point did you join Black Library and get involved with the Heresy? What kind of book were we on when that became your thing?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, I started working for Black Library initially as a freelancer, not as an editor, but doing their videos, doing the Black Library TV interviews. So I used to run a little media production business, and doing author interviews and book trailers on contract for Black Library. And it's blurred the lines in my head.
Sure.
Like when I actually started, I think Tales of Heresy was when I first sort of got into doing those videos, but then I think Age of Darkness was about to be released or had just been released when I started. So that's book 16. Yeah, 16. And so that would have been, I think that had just come out when I started at Black Library. And I remember the first book that was being worked on was The Outcast Dead. And I had talked to Graham McNeil about the story kind of as an interviewer, like asking him for behind the scenes gossip. I think the video is still online somewhere, like on YouTube or something on the old channel. But like getting his thoughts on like the process of writing that book before it was finished. And then I arrived at Black Library, I think like the week that manuscript landed on our desks. So, hey, it's the new Horus Heresy book. Which of the editors is going to read it? I was like, oh, me, pick me. I dived straight into working on that book. That was like in the first couple of weeks after I arrived.
So you've come in as an editor. At what point do you come chief Horus Heresy pedant? For those,
there was
you are a stickler.
Definitely an element of pedantry about my job there. So this was around the time as well that they were planning out the first of the limited edition novellas. So Promethean Sun, I think, was the very first one that they did as a limited edition release. Yeah. That was Nick Kime's novella, and that I think that was already being worked on before I arrived. But it was as with many things when somebody works at Black Library, it's a slow burn project. But then that was sort of picking up. And in fact, this comes back to talking about Space Marine armor, Mark 7 armor. So they were compiling the color section for the middle, the middle of the book, and A.D. Wood was the designer who was laying it out, and I was like, oh my god, I know you from when I was a kid, when I used to play Warhammer. You were in White Dwarf. And he was laying out the color section, and he put in a piece of artwork of a Salamander's Space Marine, and the guy was wearing Mark 7 armor. And they sent this thing around saying, like, hey, this is the color section we're going to publish with this novella. It's all looking pretty good. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions? Otherwise we're going to send this to the printers. And I just attached a note, and I was like, sorry, they wouldn't have this kind of armor in the Horus Heresy. Got, blank stares from several other people. Like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, Mark 7 armor came around after the Siege of Terror. It was sometime around the second founding, which was, maybe a century or so after and again, blank stares. And I was like, I can go and I'll find my source that I'm citing here, and just pulled out a bunch of sort of references from the Index Astartes articles and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, you're a pretty big nerd for this stuff, right? It's like, oh, well, yes, I am. Thank you. It helped us to kind of tailor the color section for that book straight away. It's like, this is very specific knowledge. and with the Outcast Dead as well, there was some stuff with the timeline of the events of the story, which I flagged up at the time and said we should consider what this means for the storytelling opportunities for the rest of the series. And with some stuff had already been set in motion, I was like, we need to account for that, because it seems like a discrepancy, it seems like a mistake. So if we want to lean into that, that's cool. Let's make more of an issue of the, why it makes sense for the story and explain it. And I think there'd never been a single person who had visibility on all of the Horus Heresy stories before that point. Lots of editors who'd worked on lots of stuff. But this was the thing that really surprised me, was for this series that I knew inside out, like the back of my hand, no other editor at Black Library, none of them, not Nick or Lindsay or anybody that had come before that, nobody had read every single story and was able to sort of compare them. And I was like, oh, I've read every single Horus Heresy story, and kind of sort of making sure that I could point out where things might become inconsistent was, I guess the kind of the value, the way in to make it clear that this was something that needed to happen if you wanted to have a series that was getting bigger and bigger and laying the foundations for an intellectual property, a setting that existed. To have it become wildly divergent would be really problematic, and I think it was keeping it consistent. It didn't need to have pure continuity, but it did need to be consistent, and that's something that I think is super important. And I think there's a lot of IPs out there that have moved away from that. Like people have said, Star Wars for a long time went really divergent and started, hey, we can do literally anything we want in Star Wars. And it's like, I don't know, you might upset people if you just change things, or if you don't make account of that one story or where that guy was named or whatever. And that was basically all I ever wanted, was for the Horus Heresy to just be internally consistent and consistent with Warhammer 40,000. And you could totally have misinformation or contradiction as long as it could be explained why it existed. And I think that, that's like real life. Like things are inconsistent at times, but like understanding why and making the most of it is what makes it feel a bit more authentic.
Yeah, and it helps ground the series, and it reduces those kind of moments where your disbelief gets to the point where you are drawn out of it, which is good to see. And to be fair to Black Library, I think had they sat down and planned out the whole Horus Heresy series, they might have been able to do that. But they said originally when they got the authors together right at the very start, and this would have been, I guess this was well before my time, this was Mark Gascoigne era at Black Library, and they said, oh yeah, we're going to do a trilogy of novels, and it's going to be about the Horus Heresy, and then we're going to tell the complete story across 3 novels. And, in the first couple of meetings, it was like, oh, this is going to be way more than 3 novels. We can't even tell, the first bit of the first bit of the first bit of the first bit of Istvan in 1 novel. So understanding who these characters are is going to take a few books to really ramp up. But yeah, the series just kept growing. And I think to begin with, it was assumed maybe 12 books, and then it became, maybe 20 books, and then it's, probably 25 to 30. And I think by the time I left, we knew it was like, man, this is going to be like 60 books if we want to do all of the stories that everybody keeps asking for. And it's hard. It's hard to know. It's like running a marathon, except they keep adding new miles onto the end of the marathon, in order to make sure everybody gets a chance to actually stretch their legs. I think, again, well before my time, I don't want to speak for them, but I think the people who were around at that time, at the beginning of the series, had no idea how successful and how long-reaching this series was going to be, and they hadn't planned for that. They'd built for a trilogy, they'd built for a trilogy of trilogies, and then very quickly realized, oh my god, this is going to be huge. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And we've had various people on talking in various different ways about that kind of thing. So you've come in as a chief editor. You've got, I can imagine for you, just having spoken to you a number of times, that, kind of controlling the information and having it at your fingertips is not something you find too arduous.
I've got one of those brains that I'll be reading something and I'll be like, is that that's something about that pings me as wrong, so I'll circle it in red pen and then like check it out later. It's like, oh yeah, no, that guy's name, we already gave his first name and it's not that.
Sure.
You know, like little details like that. I don't always necessarily remember what it is that's striking me as inconsistent, but I usually know where I should look, or I know the kinds of information where, when it's stated like a date or a location or the order of events that must have happened in order for this to be true, for some reason my brain just like highlights that stuff like naturally, and it's like, oh, I should check that out. That's something I should just confirm.
So what was one of the most challenging aspects of taking on that role for you then?
Oh man, like communicating that stuff out to
Sure.
people, to authors or to people who are producing the books without seeming like a douchebag, like, because and I realized like it could sound totally like, to authors who've been on this series for years, like, who's this guy who's come in and told us we're getting stuff wrong? I'm like, no, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, are you aware of what we said before? Like, are we remembering that this character was already around before and he had this interaction with this other guy, and now he doesn't seem to remember that like interaction? Like, are we sure that's, you know, is that like something we want to like highlight, or is it something that we should perhaps change? And finding a way to make it clear that I was there to improve the consistency of the series, and the, you know, the quality of the interactions between the texts, not to say you got this is wrong, or you got this, you've misinterpreted this. And it's hard because this is a creative like pursuit. This is a creative industry, and really, really cool story ideas being in any way constrained by something else that the author didn't even do themselves. That's hard. It's hard to manage, and it's hard to communicate to people without it seeming like I'm saying, hey, you got this wrong.
Sure.
Because that was never the intention.
So, you know, I'm not expecting names or anything, but did you find that go down well, or did you find certain types of authors struggle with that more? Because obviously we've got, just to kind of put a little bit of context on that, we've got some of the authors here, like I'll pull Gav out, say he's worked in the rules writing as a team, and is part of that. Some of these other authors have been writing books by themselves in their office for their career.
I mean, there's a huge, you know, every author has their own origin story kind of thing, like, and you know, there's similar. So some of them worked at Games Workshop first, and some of them, you know, had never written for any other publisher before Black Library, and they all had their processes. They all had differing levels of understanding. Another thing I had to do in several cases was kind of onboard new authors into writing for the Horus Heresy. And now some of those guys are, you know, writing their novels and their audio dramas and so on. You know, they were not around at the beginning, the same as I wasn't around at the beginning, and finding a way to make that accessible to them. I like people like Gav. Gav has a huge wealth of knowledge from the old times, like the old Games Workshop and working in the studio, and Graham as well. Graham worked in the design studio, and you see these guys, you know, they're great friends with people like Phil Kelly and, you know, the old guard of the studio. And they have this amazing kind of like shared understanding of the world and the setting. And I found that was not actually necessarily the same as what was going to be done for the Horus Heresy. A lot of the stuff that had been, you know, decided as the direction for new stories and stuff, it was like, oh, we're going to need to change this idea that you guys, we've never published, but you guys are very attached to. But then finding out what it was about the ideas, the old ideas that excited them, we found ways to work it in. And I think actually it improved it overall, having people who would say, hey man, like I've got this idea, like you've told me that it doesn't fit with what we've already done. Like I want to do this idea. Like this is why I'm excited about this idea. And having that conversation between the editor and the writer, we were able to find ways to do really cool stuff. And I would never have thought to go to those places in the story or the setting to find those opportunities if these guys hadn't had all of this expertise and experience in the past, and they hadn't brought these ideas to the table and then fought for it. And I think like that's always the best interaction you can have between a writer and an editor, is when the editor asks a question and the author defends that, you know, their answer, their position on it not completely inflexibly, but just be like, this is why I think it's cool. And then between the two of you, find the way to make it work. And that's always a better product for it. And like, I always found it so fascinating, so exciting to hear, like, even, and Alan Merritt as well, like these guys, huge titans of Warhammer, like not literally titans of Warhammer, like these guys from the, from back in the day, these guys who lived and breathed this stuff for, decades in some cases, knowing everything that made them excited about it and these ideas that they had. And I just got to sort of sit in the room and soak this stuff up, and some of the grand ideas and the big explanations for the deep Warhammer 40,000 lore came out of these meetings, and I was just like, oh, this is so awesome. Like, we would never have thought to put this stuff in if these guys didn't have this wealth of knowledge.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can fully appreciate that. Within that, you were talking about bringing new writers into the stable, and we've seen, if you look at the last, 8 books, there are some different names in there than previously.
Yeah.
How, obviously, I mean, I've gone and talked to these guys. I kind of know. How did you find them sliding in? Because some of them have been involved in, and some of them haven't been involved in 40k or what have you. And obviously, they've, they haven't replaced, but people have moved on from the heresy as well. How was your experience of that changing in how the heresy was working? Was it as smooth as we all hope it would be? Or
yeah, I mean, at times, yeah, it was not. It's not that it was ever difficult, but it was certainly. It was like, how much do you need to know in order to make a cool Horus Heresy story, and how much can I tank for you editorially? How much can I? How many of the cracks can I help you paper over, as opposed to, it's impossible to say to some, like, for example, Guy Haley, when he first sort of came in to do Horus Heresy stories, I think he did like a short story for one of the anthologies, and he just said to me, like, look, seriously, like, where do I begin with this? Like, I don't have time to read 25 books. And I was like, no, okay, we'll figure out what kind of story you want to tell, and we'll work backwards from there, and I'll prepare like a reading list for you. I said, like, you are going to have to just read some stuff. Like, I can't magically, wave a wand and put that knowledge into an author's head. And I did this, for each author, like David Annandale and Guy and my mind's gone blank. Various others as they came to the series. Like, I would basically say, what kind of story are we going to tell? And like, let me think about what you need to know in order to make that story happen, and then what I can do to shortcut the rest of it for you. And I had like a folder on my computer in the office, which was just reference documents, which I would update. And there was like the complete Horus Heresy timeline, like of every event that we knew of, and some that, readers didn't know about at that point, like stuff we were planning or stuff that just needed to be written down somewhere so we didn't forget it. And just being able to highlight sections of documents like that, who was present at Nicaea, or who was present at Ullanor, and having that kind of quick reference with links in the document saying, if you want to read more about this, you read these pages from this book. Or if you want to know about how, so Chris Raitt writing about Jagatai Khan and Horus, and sort of coming up with that, they had a very unique, close relationship among the Primarchs. These two Primarchs were very loyal to one another. And like, I was like, oh, cool. Well, I don't have anything that contradicts that, but if you want to talk about these guys, you're going to have to read this, this, and this, because that will really give you like insight on what little we know about the Khan at that point. And yeah, it was never hard. It was sometimes a challenge, but it was more about like, it's like downloading the internet into like my brain, the calculator, like trying to just say like, okay, what's the minimum amount of information to communicate to this new writer in order to try and just provide the quickest route to telling the story we want to tell. And then how can I then help tidy up any continuity stuff afterwards, rather than go and read 35 novels before you can write your story.
And obviously there's there's a big part to play by the authors in that. You're obviously picking, Black Library are picking people who they think are extremely competent for starters, and understand Games Workshop and how the IPs work, even though Horus Heresy is slightly different from 40k. You know, they can trust them to run with it as well, which is good.
There was that element as well, like with the submissions work. Like basically, it was you can submit for Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000. You know, that as Warhammer Fantasy as was, but like you can't submit for Time of Legends and you can't submit for the Horus Heresy because the unique challenges of onboarding and understanding like the wider series, especially when stuff's so interlinked, it meant that you needed somebody that you knew could deliver a novel to a decent quality in a good time frame, which, you know, even ADB struggles with. Let's be honest.
It's no secret.
It is known. You know, we love you, Aaron. Just having that kind of security of knowing this is a writer who is tried and tested. We know that they can produce good quality work on deadline, and that's not something we're going to have to worry about. Then we can just figure out getting them into this series, which has been running for however many books by this point. So it was kind of like it was sometimes perceived as like a bit of an old boys club for writing for the Horus Heresy. It's like no, it's just that we don't have time to test whether or not somebody can write before we onboard them into this ridiculously long-running series. We'd rather have, you know, make sure that they can before we actually set them to work on their first Heresy thing. And you'll notice that there was always a short story or an audio drama before somebody went onto a full Heresy book, and that's not accidental.
No, absolutely. And actually, in doing this, collecting kind of all the authors who've been involved, or most of them, there's more authors than you think. And when I look at the stable of Black Library authors, actually, you know, a lot of those authors have other projects as well. And I would guess that some of those people are particularly hard to. Can you slip this book in here? We need it by this time. I think maybe that's an underappreciated aspect of novel writing for an IP.
Yeah, finding a space on somebody's like personal schedule to actually produce something for a premium range. So this is where Guy Haley comes in, because the guy is a machine. Like he can churn out the great quality stories really quickly, like at an almost shameful rate. Like he makes other like great authors look really, really bad when he's oh yeah, you need a novella, yeah, I can do that end of next week. Oh my god, okay, great. But yeah, you have to timetable. I've seen like I still work with Graham McNeil now, and he has he plans out his year in terms of what he's going to be writing at any given time. And when I was, before I worked at Black Library, seeing his wall planner in his office when we were interviewing him for the videos, it was like, wow, this must be like something that Graham does, like very uniquely. It's like, nope, all the successful writers, all of the professional-minded people are all doing this. Like, this is not just something you do in your spare time in an evening. And Dan Abnett saying, keeping strict office hours, like he's at his desk first thing in the morning, and I can't remember, he writes. At the time, he said he was writing Warhammer stories in the morning and comics in the afternoon, something like that. And then at 5 p.m., like he said, he just he ended his working day and he would go and actually have a life with his family and friends. Otherwise, people like me and people like Aaron, like we would just be working until the wee small hours with no structure and no organization. And that's why I've got no hair left. I think actually, yeah, maybe there's a link there.
Maybe. So what, in speaking there, what are the challenges? Say you've given the book out and we've had it in various instances where authors have been late for a number of reasons. What are the challenges then for you as editors, as planners of this series, if a book is late or if it's seriously late? I mean, obviously, it would depend on the book and how instrumental it is, I suppose, into fitting in.
We had so when I think once we got to sort of like, where would it be, like the Primarchs, like book 20 kind of thing, in the main Horus Heresy range, it was like, I think we started to like plan out, like, in the grand scheme of things, how far along are we in this series? And we started to think about, can we build a backlog of stories that fit into certain eras of the war, or certain kind of time periods within the wider war, but that it wouldn't necessarily matter what order they came out in. If it ever came to it, and we ever had an author who was unable to complete a project for any reason, what would we slot in its place?
Sure.
And weirdly, that came straight in almost as soon as we'd started planning how we were going to approach that. It became necessary to do that when they switched to the collector's hardbacks. We were building an anthology which we could deploy, with minimal notice, as long as it took to get something into the book trade and to send it to the printers. Yeah. We could release a main range anthology should an author ever fail to deliver for whatever reason, which was, we'd run very close in the recent past at that point. And that was Shadows of Treachery. We were just building it. I think Christian was building this anthology. And then with the strange ordering that we had to bring out the books in order to get the collector's hardbacks done, with Angel Exterminatus being the first one, we're like, oh my God, we've got a gap in the book trade. We need to bring out that spare book. So almost as soon as we'd started planning for it, we then immediately had to deploy it. And that became very apparent that was something we would need to do. And we always had it in mind that there was always going to be however many books we needed for the year, or however many stories we needed for digital release, or however many audio dramas. You'd always have one or two spares just in case. And if it ever came down to it, you could prioritize, hey, we've got, this other author is also working on a Horus Heresy idea. We could maybe drop their other projects that they're working on, like their Space Marine novel trilogy, or they were going to do that fantasy book instead. We're going to drop that, and we're going to pull their Heresy product forwards because we now need it urgently. Yeah. And I think originally we in the Primarchs, in fact, this was a micro planning. This was where it became apparent that we'd need to do this. Prince of Crows was supposed to be in the Primarchs, and instead we brought forwards Rob Sanders' The Serpent Beneath. And that was like a last minute, this book goes to print in a week. We need to pull that other novella forward. So Rob and I worked around the clock over, Thursday to Monday, him sending me drafts by email, me editing, putting notes in, sending them immediately back to him, and then crashing through the weekend to get this novella, fast tracked forwards. And then that went into the book. That's super exciting and really invigorating, to work on editorially. I mean, the writers might disagree. They might say it's horrible. But I found when there was some kind of really sudden, urgent deadline, and you already had a vague idea of what the project was going to be, it's let's figure out how we can make this really awesome and really pay off. And I think some of it, weirdly, I'm not going to name names or pull out too many examples, but to my mind, some of the stories in the Horus Heresy that are the most interesting are the ones that we didn't necessarily plan from the beginning. Sure. And that kind of evolved out of either extreme deadline considerations or just things which grew from conversations about other projects. And yeah, it's an organic thing. It's a back and forth. Excellent.
That's cool. Okay, we should probably move on to a couple of books you've written or stories you've written, and your style of storytelling. So yeah. this has to come up. So we're looking at Heresy. You've written recently Malcador, First Lord of the Imperium, and relatively recently, Last Council.
That's a year ago now. Yeah.
Last Council, and
yeah.
Heart of the Pharos. Was there any others? I'm trying to think now. There's some that link back to Heresy issues without necessarily being Heresy stories, like Mortarian's Heart. But there's a link between your stories, a few of your stories, shall we say, in that you approach subjects that are contentious or have had some bad rap. And
what an exceptionally diplomatic way to put it. Yeah.
And then within that you tell a story and divide opinion, possibly even more.
Yes.
Are you attracted to those because of because they are different? And let's be fair. When we look at Mortarian's Heart, which is not I say not a heresy book, but relates back and has fed in with other stories and things like that.
Yeah,
that is that was a story from a codex which had a bad rap, and did you write that to make that work within the universe?
So yes with an if, no with a but. Again, like looking for ways to always looking for ways to make the setting feel deeper and more consistent with itself. When you release something and the audience responds negatively to it, or if they have questions that aren't answered, you can decide whether you want to lean into that and just leave those questions pointedly unanswered and allow like theory crafting and people figure out their own answers. Or you can say, okay, we need to clear that up for a reason, like for whatever the reason might be, like there's something else planned in future. And I really like the challenge, the unique challenge that it presents, where somebody says, this doesn't make sense. And you say, well, does it not make sense? Like, is there something that's missing from your understanding of this? And with the addition of a couple of facts or a bit of context, it would make sense. I think actually Mortarian's Heart obviously is a great example. This was the thing from the Grey Knights Codex where Kaldor Drago, the perception among a lot of players, and weirdly not even just Grey Knights players, just people who have opinions about things online. You may have noticed there's one or two of them about. They thought, so this guy, this Space Marine, can just walk up, knock down a Primarch, and then like humble and humiliate him in front of his entire army, and that's fine, is it? That makes sense within the setting, and it's like, well, obviously that's not literally what happened. You walk up to, hey Mortarion, you think you're so tough? Knock him down and carve someone's name on his heart. It's like there has to be some context there for that. Like that can't be true if it doesn't have something that we're not that we don't know about. And one of the things that I always like to think about with Warhammer, writing for Warhammer as opposed to any other series or setting, a lot of the information about the history of the events and the history of the setting, the world, the Imperium, the whole idea behind Warhammer 40,000 is so much of it is deliberately hidden. And if you just have a couple more little nuggets of information, stuff starts to fall into place and you start to unlock deeper stories and more opportunities for more storytelling in future. And at the time with Mortarian's Heart, we knew who the founders of the Grey Knights were going to be. We already knew that. We'd had it worked out for like a few months. And understanding why the Grey Knights would consider it so important to deal with Mortarion as opposed to any other threat that they might be facing at the time, but also what Mortarion might know about the Grey Knights in response. And there's a lot of hints. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who either is catching up with the Horus Heresy or anything else, but understanding why and how the Grey Knights came to be founded and the context around that has huge implications for them in Warhammer 40,000, but then even they don't necessarily know the truth of it now, and that's probably for the best. But Mortarion, he was literally there when it happened. He was not in the room, but he was alive at that time. He knew the key players. He met Malcador, and he knew Nathaniel Garrow, who, all these people who were around at the time, but they weren't necessarily part of the events that actually took place. But then having more of the context around that, you suddenly start to get these exciting moments of revelation, which come through in the storytelling. I think when you ask about the kind of stories that I like to tell, the kind of storytelling I like to do, I like to read a story or watch a film or anything where you're taking on board the kind of the narrative in video games, as I do now, like this. The idea of being surprised and excited as it goes, as you read through it, as you progress through the story, I think is just as important as explaining or confirming details about a story. And the Horus Heresy is an interesting one because everybody thought they knew what it was, and I did. I thought I knew what the Horus Heresy was. You need to understand the Horus Heresy in order to understand Warhammer 40,000. But then everybody knows, well, yeah, the Emperor, Horus rose up against the Emperor. The Emperor, fought Horus down on Terra and was mortally wounded, but he killed Horus. And then that made the eternal conflict between the forces of chaos and the Imperium. And, so shall it ever continue for 10,000 years. But that's not the whole story. And a lot of people's confusion or loss of interest in some cases is because they thought they knew what the Horus Heresy was. And then they realized, as we explored it, oh my God, there's a lot more here. Like, there's a hell of a lot more. It's not just Isfan 3, Isfan 5, Cygnus Prime, Calth, Fal, Siege of Terra. Like, it's not just a series of sort of vaguely connected battles. There's an entire universe of storytelling that goes around with this. And I think, to understand there is stuff that you don't know, I think even when you know how a story ends, to be surprised by the route you come to that ending. When you know all of the destinies of all, or you think you know all the destinies of all the characters, you know exactly how it's going to shake up, to then have that challenged in the moment of, oh my God, what if that's not true? Or, what if the thing that I assumed is actually only half of the story and there's another part? And I get super excited when I suddenly see additional context in a story. And I love the idea of prequels that help you to understand the original story more. And to my mind, that's where Star Wars, with the prequel trilogy, and with Prometheus going into Alien, it was like they never quite paid off in the way that you were expecting them to, and yet it was exciting at the time, but it didn't quite feel like it was 100% connected, or it didn't quite feel consistent.
Sure.
And of course, I'm sure there are people who feel the same about the Horus Heresy as it's unraveling, but I've seen a little bit further than a lot of people, not as far as a lot of the guys now who are still working on it, but I could see how we could still manage to surprise and delight people in the telling of stories where they thought they knew how it went down, or they thought they knew the truth. It's like, just for the moment while they're experiencing that story, turning from page to page, or waiting for the next scene of an audio drama, and to hear words that they never thought they would hear uttered by a character, for example, or a revelation about something that happened in the past, presented secondhand or third hand through a character, to suddenly just think, oh my God, what if that's not what I thought it was? And I find those are the kinds of stories that I like to tell. And those are the kinds of revelations that I think are the most rewarding.
And something doing this series of interviews, in some ways, that should be an obvious answer. And it's something that's been repeated by pretty much every author. And I suppose if you don't stop to think, you never ask the question. But actually, yeah, well, that's what being an author, wanting to tell stories, is. If you're just repeating a story, then you're not an author.
Exactly. It's like it could just be a Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
If you just want to know the facts about a thing, this is something I don't know. I hesitate to use the word frustrated by, but I get a little bit disillusioned when I see people saying, I just want to see a story which is just X, Y, Z, happens in that order, and it's just very clear and it's self-contained and that's it. I'm like, that's so unrealistic. That's nothing like the real world. No stories have the luxury of having a beginning, where the storyteller brings you into the beginning of the story required for your understanding of this piece that they're going to tell you. But real life doesn't have a beginning. It just it's the never-ending progression of events, and the huge conflicts of the age previous to the current one were just as important and every bit as world defining as what you have right now. I think Game of Thrones shows that. There's always this sense of, the people who came before us were better than us, but they never knew what it was, and we're never going to be able to live up to that legend kind of thing. And yet the stories that are happening now are just as important as the ones that happened before. The ones that happened before them are just as important as the ones that happened there. It's a kind of a sense of a moment in history is far more important than just wrapping everything up neatly, beginning, middle, and end.
And I think just to be fair to people, I think that people get into stories on different levels for different reasons, like we do with everything else. And you were talking about the way you were talking about the Horus Heresy and us thinking we know something. It's like having the Ladybird book of the World War One, and then actually digging in, reading stuff, and finding out what really happened. And we get taught the Ladybird book, and then we move on. And some people are quite happy to read, and that's what they want to do, and they're not interested to go beyond it. And some people are.
I know Dan Abnett often said, like, if you consider the whole story of the Horus Heresy, it's something like The World at War, like the sweeping documentary series, like many, many, many different linked stories, all connected, but it's not just there was a battle with the 10 characters on each side, and then at the end this side won and this other side lost. The idea being more like you could dip into many parts of this story and you could tell an entire character arc that never touches on any other part of this thing. But to have different ways of understanding it. People often say, like, oh, I don't really care about all of this stuff in the middle. I don't care about these characters. I don't care about, Imperium Secundus, or I don't care about whether or not the White Scars were loyal or traitors in the beginning. Like, I don't care about any of that. I just want to know how it ends. I just want to see the end of the Siege of Terra. I'm like, great, there's a book for that called Visions of Heresy. It literally will show you everything that happens in order. You can just read it, and then you will know all of those details. Or you can, like you say, you can get the top-level Wikipedia like summary of everything that happens in order, or you can have individual character moments, and you can have story arcs and progressions and those single pairs of eyes that kind of see the events of history unfolding from their point of view on the ground, and some of those people aren't going to survive, and that's fine. Saul Tarvitz is not coming back.
I think, to be fair, there's enough people talking about, have blogged about, have podcasted about these things, where those people who do want to skip over books can do so. And there's no doubt that people like you and me are going to want every nuance we can absorb, and that's the beauty of a series like this. And hopefully it will continue past Siege of Terror as well. So moving on to your heresy stories, particularly, we'll pick out the two, Last Council and Malkador, full of revelations, of potential revelations, shall we say? People who've listened to the podcast, I talked about when we did Convention Secundus a few years ago in Nottingham, and we were lucky enough to have yourself and Gav and a few other people turn up, and we spent a lot of time discussing kind of our own personal views and theories on the heresy, and as a result, your stories didn't surprise me as much as they surprised other people, because this is a view you had on the heresy for a while.
And again, it's like this stuff with the events that that I never would have thought were part of this setting come from in turn like other people's ideas, like Alan Merritt or Gav Thorpe or Phil Kelly or Alan Bly, people who had these ideas that they kind of accepted as being true even if they weren't published. And then I was sort of, I would hear discussions about ideas that would just sort of stoke these ideas within me that then you could take further. I think it's kind of that iterative process, but everybody has their own interpretation of those events for real.
Sure. Yeah. So that's partly what I was going to say. Can you see in other people's books? Oh yeah, he's got a theory there that I don't buy into. But can you see that in other books? I mean, I think these two pieces are maybe more upfront with those concepts.
I think so. There's Aaron and I had a conversation about this a few years ago, where he would come, because he was a relative newcomer to the series when I was starting to work at Black Library. Like, he'd done his first couple of bits and pieces for the heresy, and he was kind of still considered himself like he and I, we at the time, we definitely considered ourselves like the kids who'd just come to the grown-ups table.
Sure.
And he said, like, we would sort of discuss this stuff away from everybody else, talking about when Alan Merritt talked about how the different stories and the different kind of like franchises, almost like the Salamander's novels, Nick Salamander's novels versus Aaron's Night Lord's books and so on. And there was kind of this weird idea. I mean, there was a lot of Warhammer players who didn't think Black Library was canon, which was mystifying to me. But like, I think it was because there would be such diversity between the different like mini-series kind of thing, between different authors' visions, and I thought it was more important to make sure stuff was broadly consistent, but with lots of room for interpretation.
Sure.
And I think that's more and more how you get with like different authors working on a single series. You don't have the same kind of freedom because these are events that cross over between different stories or characters that sort of appear in many different places, and an author will pick up somebody else's characters for a couple of stories and then, leave them in the box for somebody else to use after that. But like, one of the things I disagreed with Aaron, the other thing was that you could literally say up is down or black is white in one book and then contradict it completely 100% in another book. And he said, oh, that's what Alan said. And I was like, I'm not sure that's what Alan meant, if that's what Alan said. Like, Alan Merritt always wanted stuff to make sense and to be consistent and to feel like Warhammer. I think he said many times we're not quite at his vision of what it could be, but he didn't know exactly what his vision was for the Horus Heresy as it was unfolding. He was willing to let the authors explore and find the truth of it.
Sure.
And he would often say, like with the Malcador stuff, the Sigillite Order and all of this stuff, this had been in his headcanon for a long time. And the first time he sort of sat down, we said, Alan, we've got a question. Like, what is Malcador? And he just went like, he kind of sat back in his chair like, oh, wow. Like, I've been waiting a long time to have this conversation. And there was like this 3-hour, like you said, like convention secundus kind of thing, this 3-hour exchange of ideas and gut feels and like, just wouldn't it be cool if, but like Alan Merritt had a very clear idea in his head of the relationship between Malcador and the Emperor, which we had barely even looked at. He was just that guy that got, smacked by Lorgar at the beginning of the First Heretic.
Yeah.
Like, and he was kind of a nice, kindly sort of uncle figure. And this was one of the things that, again, like what you think you know about a character is not necessarily the whole story. I think that makes them more interesting. And he, like, the first story that came out of this was Chris Raitt writing The Sigillite, the audio drama. And it was just beginning to hint at, oh my God, there is a much bigger backstory here. And then Jim Swallow picked up again in the Garrow, I think it was in the Garrow, the 2-part audio,
yes,
sorry, not 2-part, the longer length audio one, where at the end Malcador suddenly becomes scary and like kind of forces Garrow to kneel. And like he compels him psychically. Oh wow! Hang on! This isn't the nice, kindly uncle figure. And then that mask kind of goes back on. And this is literally a character who wore a mask in one of the books and concealed his identity from other people, including Primarchs. The idea that Malcador being something very different from how he was portrayed in the Imperium, the citizens of the Imperium, by the Emperor, even to his own sons. The idea that there was something bigger and a bigger story there was something that Alan Merritt had just considered, like, yeah, of course that's true. Like, never ever thought anybody would ever consider it otherwise. And I love the fact that, in spite of it, we had all these conversations about what the intention of the legions was, or like the destiny of the Imperium, or like whether Malcador was entirely on side with the message from the beginning. All of this stuff came out of that first meeting with when it was discussed with Alan, and it was like mind-blowing in complexity, but also just like, oh my God, imagine if even just a small part of this like actually makes it to being in the canon. That would be fantastic. It would open so many opportunities for more stories. And I love the fact that as time has gone on, more and more people have started to have almost word for word the exact same conversations that we, the editors and authors, had in that room. I've seen in the last month people having that conversation on forums. One of the ones about, I find it really convenient that the most psychic human in the history of mankind mind dies at the exact same time as the Emperor. Like, that's so... And I was like, oh my God, that's what we all said in the room that day. Like, that's so cool. Like, just as the pieces of the puzzle have started to kind of basically be put in front of the audience, in front of the readers, more and more of those same questions are coming up. It's like, that's what we were saying. That's what we were saying like 4 or 5 years ago. It's exactly the same conversation. It's so cool. And that's why I loved, like, I'm happy to write stories or to see stories published that just make people talk to each other and have those kinds of discussions. And I loved that Convention Secundus thing. I loved that round conversation that we had where, I mean, how many people were there? Like 25 or 30 people in that room at that time,
at most,
sat in a circle, and we were just theory crafting, and the authors were sat just alongside everybody else, and it was like, I think it would be cool if this, or like, has anyone ever considered that, or like, what about this character's motivations? What if they were different motivations? I love those kinds of conversations, and that almost feels more important to me, that people engage with other fans and enthusiasts on that level. I find that more important than whether or not they think what a character said in a story is true or not. And I would much rather see people just looking at... I screenshotted something on my Twitter from Reddit the other day where somebody just said, like, this is my theory about Warhammer 40,000 based on what we now know about Malkador. And then there was like a whole load of conversation replies where people were just like, no, disagree, like hard disagree, I'm not going to talk to you about this. And then one guy was like, like, I didn't think of that before, but now I'm going to go reread like some novels, and I'm just going to assume that that's true and see how that changes my interpretation of them. And I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. It's like somebody has now like just thought for a minute, I want to go and experience this in a new way. And I'm like, I didn't even have to do anything. I just like sat and watched these two guys just talk to each other on a forum until they reached this for themselves. I was like, that's so cool. That's so rewarding. Like, I could just step away from that story and just be happy that, like, even just those two guys had that conversation. That's so cool.
And therein lies, I suppose, the reason we're not going to get definitive answers, because A, you know, are there definitive answers, and B, it stops that conversation.
I think.
Obviously, some stuff will be finished, but
yeah. I think it's interesting because it's not strictly relevant to the Horus Heresy. It doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't change who the characters are or the decisions that they ultimately make. But it does change your understanding of why, potentially. And I think, like, maybe in time, because right now, Black Library, you know, obviously I'm not privy to the current plans for how it's going to all wrap up, but like knowing that, like, you know, we know that the Siege of Terror is now approaching. We know that the series, as we understand it, is coming to its conclusion. Like that, which is, you know, God, I think this is actually the longest. It's something like the longest running single narrative series or single linked multi-author series like ever. It's something like that. There's this amazing kind of accolade that, you know, nowhere else in science fiction, like multiple author, single story, like single franchise, like storyline through a series or something like that. But like the fact that then comes to an end, and this is what I really like, and this is what I try to do in the sides of the Emperor stuff, Warhammer 40,000. It's like, this is just one little bit of time. In the grand scheme of things, the entirety of the Horus Heresy is just like 14 years. And then there's all this other stuff that needs to happen like around it. You need to understand what came before it. You need to understand what will come after it in order to fully appreciate it. And I think, like, people, one of the things I saw very, very weird divide of like either hard agree or hard disagree with the Malkador stuff. Should Malkador be able to lock down Horus psychically? And like, obviously I've got my theory on it. I mean, it's written in a story, but I think, like, if you understand that Horus is the big bad of the Horus Heresy, Horus was not the first big bad that the Imperium faced, not even close. And like, you have all of these other eras that preceded it. And the only question which I think, like, I would love it if people just walked away from that story is, if Horus is the big bad of the Horus Heresy, who was the big bad of unification before Narth and Doom? And I think just even if the possibility is there that was Malcador might have originally been the big bad, and something about his interaction with the Emperor changed that, I think is really, really exciting. But it's not relevant to the Horus Heresy, so it almost certainly would not be answered within the Horus Heresy. However,
a Malcador series
Alan Merritt had a lot... Sorry?
A Malcador series would be perfect. But yeah.
Well, imagine. I mean, the people are always asking about Unification Wars series, and Alan Merritt had many, many, many thoughts on what the Unification Wars were, and why the Primarchs are the way they are, and what did the Emperor have before the Primarchs. And there was a lot of really cool ideas, and it's not just as simple as he had Thunder Warriors. There was talk about maybe he had generals all with unique personalities that he'd recruited or that had allied themselves with him, and in sitting around a table one day he was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could control all of these unique personalities instead of just having to deal with other people? And suddenly it changes the motivation of the Imperium and the Emperor.
One of the exciting things about that, so you've just put across theories, possibilities, and everything else, which are actually very different from the stuff you were talking about at Imperium Secundus as well. And not to say they can even be linked, but we talked previously about other things down the line. But so just as me on this side of the microphone, for people, because I think there's been an issue where people who are reading your stories believe that you think you know everything, and it's quite interesting. As say from here, that is a very different theory, a very different discussion than the one that was had in Convention Secundus. So you can have multiple theories in your head, I suppose, and there's no reason not to. And there's lots of questions and possibilities that come off that as well.
And I think as well, to have, this is the idea. I think this is the weirdest thing. A lot of discourse and discussion in the world right now, where people have an idea that they are really attached to or that they really believe in, and then things change. And being able to step away from that idea without considering it to be a personal insult or an affront or to have undermined what you said previously. It's previously, this is what I thought to be true. Now I understand that there is other information. Now I think actually my view has changed. Yeah. And I think in general, just having an idea, I certainly don't know everything that that will ever happen in this series. I have a lot more insight on stuff that was planned while I was there, and I knew a lot of stuff that we were working on, but my knowledge of what was coming out at Games Workshop ended with Mortarion as a plastic kit. That was the last thing I knew that was being worked on before I left. And so everything after that has been just as exciting and new for me. But then this is the thing, I'm in the same position. This is where it comes in cycles. Graham and Gav, when they worked in the studio, they had very clear ideas in their heads about the back-pinning truths of the setting. And since then, some of those truths have changed. And it's been okay, great. So that stuff that we thought was true, that we always assumed was true, was never put in front of players or readers, and now something else has been put in front of them. Now how can we reconcile the things that we think are cool with what is now known to be true? Sure. And I think as you explore the setting, that's just going to keep happening. I'm not wedded to any of these ideas. Once something comes out that changes or sort of shifts your understanding of the setting, I think it's really, really exciting to try and find a way to reconcile the ideas that you had with the new direction for it. And I mean, I never sort of, get frustrated or angry on that side. I think that's really cool. It's really exciting. And I love the fact that you can see other people coming to those kinds of realizations as well.
Cool. Just a couple quick questions before we start to wrap up. Is there a part of you that enjoys knowing that your story is going to cause the furore?
Are you calling me a firebrand?
No, I'm asking if you think you are.
I enjoy knowing that there will be fierce discussion.
Cool.
But it's not that I enjoy people disagreeing. I enjoy the fact that people have feelings about stuff that's, let's be honest, they have feelings about toy soldiers and it's not real.
Yeah.
But to have feelings about it that are so strong that they're willing to, to get angry about it, or to get super excited when something new comes along, or however they choose to react to anything. Like, I think that's really cool, because this is stuff that's being, essentially, this is cool, toy soldiers that the writers are conjuring from their minds in order to fulfill, the needs of the setting that Games Workshop owns. And I think, like, anytime you can find a way to engage people where they feel super positive or even super negative about an idea, it just shows how resonant and how rich that fantasy is, like that setting, and the fact that people come to identify themselves with it, like they consider themselves to be like, I'm a Blood Angels fan, or Magnus did nothing wrong, hashtag, like that kind of level of fandom, I think is just awesome. And I think as long as it never goes, the Last Jedi style toxic, I think it's really cool.
Sure.
I would happily have people disagree with me on every single point of every story I'd ever written, as long as they're going to talk to me about it. Like, come and have a beer. Let's talk about what it is that you liked or didn't like. Like, seriously, I would love to sit and have a conversation with somebody who hard disagreed with a story that I'd written. Sure. I would just love to know why it was that they didn't accept it or they didn't like it, because it's super interesting to just understand other people's points of view or other people's theories. And it's like, oh, I've written a story that completely undermines your theory that you had, which was the underpinning of your entire, your army project or your fan fiction that you've done. I'm like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Like, cool, tell me why you think it means that it doesn't work. And maybe actually there is a way for it to work, or maybe it's just like, oh, cool, well, you don't have to consider this to be true if you don't like it. You can just ignore it.
Yeah, that's cool. And finally, I asked this to Dan Abnett. It's a bit different for you, as not a novel writer per se, but is there a heresy story that you wish you could have written, either one that's been done or one that hasn't yet been done? Is there a story that you'd want to tell that?
Oh man, no.
One that got away.
So again, I mean, yeah, aside from not being a full novelist for the series, like, so I know stuff that was discussed that probably will still happen, which
Sure.
I think is super, super awesome. Like amazing. Oh my God, if this all comes together in the way that we originally talked about, it would be so cool. So I can't really be specific because it might still happen.
Sure. Can you just mention,
and I don't want to spoil
maybe mention a character or a legion who it would be about? But it wouldn't give anything away in that respect.
No, you know what? I'm not going to.
Sure,
I'm going to give you an example of something else. So, like, the number of times where I think that this did kind of come through in the way that I linked the sides of the Emperor to the Horus Heresy through Dan's Unremembered Empire stuff and the Imperium Secundus arc through Sotha. I think that all comes down to originally, and in fact, Mark of Calth being the first book that I kind of led as an editor on, and commissioned all the stories from scratch as opposed to repurposing. I think if I hadn't read Know No Fear and been so completely blown away by that book, I don't think a lot of the other stuff in the Horus Heresy would have happened. And I think, like, I don't wish that I had written that story, or I'm so glad that Dan wrote that novel.
Sure.
Because that was a moment for me that changed my understanding of the Horus Heresy, like, fundamentally. Like, oh my God, imagine the kinds of stories we could tell now that this story exists. And like, I don't flatter myself that I wish I had told that story, because it wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been as good. But like, it still blows my mind when I think of everything that's come from that novel, and like how far into the Horus Heresy, like Horus Heresy past and Horus Heresy present and future, that one book kind of influenced, even down to the Betrayal at Calth board game. Like, that literally came from the concepts that were introduced in Know No Fear, and that's been a huge part of so many hobbyists, like, coming into the Horus Heresy, was when plastic heresy miniatures came about, and that was all framed through the ideas that started there with the Underworld War and Red versus Blue, right back to the beginning.
Wonderful stuff. Excellent. Excellent. So thank you very much for talking about that. Have you obviously, as you said, you're no longer with Games Workshop. You're across the pond now doing computer gaming stuff.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Have you got any works with Games Workshop at the moment, with Black Library at the moment? Are you got anything coming out?
So I've got a couple of pieces which I think either have been floating around for a little while, or some stuff that I've been working on since before I left. But as of now, I have so little time to do any writing.
Sure.
I'm really disappointed by that, and that's for any publisher. And it's something I need to work on. I need to get some more time for working on stuff that isn't my day job. But I think I think I've got a couple of bits floating around with Black Library, which, again, without being specific, stuff that I might see in the near future. But also I have conversations with all the authors that I've worked with, and occasionally get super excited about something that I know they're working on, and finding ways to anything I can do to help them in an amateur capacity, I'm willing to do. But I need to do more writing. You're making me feel lazy now.
Yeah, good. Do you have a little bit of an itch when you hear about the latest High Lords of Terror meeting or whatever?
I do and I don't. I think I came to the one in, was it September 2017, more than a year ago now. That was the last one that I attended, and I was it was very clearly there was a handover. There was a moment of here is everything I've done. Here, if you need any explanation, I'm here in the room right now. You can reach me on email, but I can just explain anything that's needed in this meeting. But then after this point, I think I knew that there was going to have to basically be I can't do this for two universes, two settings simultaneously. To do the same level of work and to be as invested in the Horus Heresy as I was. Would not be possible when I'm doing another day job. This was an all-consuming day job, and all of my passion and enthusiasm in my evenings as a hobbyist kind of thing. And I feel super fortunate to have worked on it in that capacity. But I don't think I would want to go back to it in a reduced capacity. I wouldn't want to do less than I did before. I wouldn't want to serve the Horus Heresy in a lesser way than I have previously. Sure. I don't think that would be right. I don't think it wouldn't feel as satisfying, and I'd much rather see other people take it, run with it, make it even cooler, make it even bigger and more exciting. And then I'll just be able to read about it like I used to when I was just a frustrated gamer who wanted to build my own Angron.
Excellent stuff. Awesome. Well, unless there's anything you want to add, I think we'll leave it there.
No, that's great. I've talked myself hoarse today.
Thank you for coming on. It's been good.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Speak to you soon.
And there we go. That is the end of another episode of The Imperial Truth. Before we do go, we missed some stuff off in the intro, but it all fills out the outro, so that's fine. Neil, something to do with some models or some legions at least?
Yeah, no, I've been. I've recently got back into playing the Heresy Legions app game, the card game on the my new phone. I recently changed phone. I went from an iPhone to an Android, and then I was sort of just flicking through, what was available, and I thought, I'll see what GW apps are on here, and then of course it came up, and because I had it on I did have it on the iPhone when it was a tested version, and then they released it on Android, but then they waited to release it on iPhone, and I sort of lost the bug, as it were. I lost the sort of the impetus to sort of go on and play it, so I just started up again, and it's interesting to see how much it's developed since we were doing the testing, because obviously they've put a lot of other legions onto there now, and there's a whole host of different cards and things, and it's amazing how how we talk about how much the when a different black book comes out, and how you get the creep, and how certain legions. So, that legion's amazing because it's got all the new toys. It's amazing how I look at some of these new cards and go, wow, they're if you have those new cards, you can sort of almost you have a really strong deck, and it makes people very hard to play against. So it's good fun though. I'm enjoying it. It's quite a nice little way of killing a few hours when I'm at work, or if I've got I'm sitting on the sofa and the wife's watching something that I'm not into.
I've got a few friends who've been playing it all the time actually, and it seems to go down well. I say I enjoyed it. My problems still remain the same. In fact, the thing that stopped me playing Legions was I was playing Hearthstone, and now I've actually deleted Hearthstone off my phone because I just realised how much time I was spending playing Hearthstone. Okay, well I've got to do my daily. Got to get that done. So go to bed, stay up in bed for a half hour, 40 minutes doing it, and then all of a sudden it's like, sugar, I should be asleep. Wake up, kind of go, oh, here's a spot here, at work, we're not doing anything. That's 40 minutes gone because, I had a slow game or whatever. And that's fine, it's cool, I enjoyed it. But I got to a point where I'm like, A, I'm not very good at building decks. Just can't be bothered half the time, a bit lazy. And B, I can use this time better. Like, there are 100 million hobbies that I would love to do. I don't have enough time for them. Reading was a big one. I've done more reading since I've stopped playing these games.
Oh, right, yes.
So,
yes.
And that's life. You have to make your choices. We're, in the Western civilized world, if you want to call it that, we are really lucky that we can choose between, a myriad. We play toy soldiers, for crying out loud. I read books about playing toy soldiers and listen to podcasts and there's, lots of other things I would love to do in my time. My PlayStation sits there. I have one game on it at a time. I don't know. I've logged a few hours for Red Dead Redemption, but I've got nowhere. I've had it for a month. So do I play Hearthstone or what have you? Or do I read or spend that time on the PlayStation or get some hobby done? And kind of made the decision that actually, don't get me wrong, I'm still going to download the odd mobile game and play them, but most of them I find I don't feel it at the time, and that's the way they get you. They make you feel like it is like what you want to be doing, but afterwards I'm like, I should have spent that time doing something else. I would feel better.
Yeah. I think I totally agree. Actually, sometimes you sit there and you think, I must just quickly do this, or I must quickly do that. But yeah, for me, it's often trying if I'm on a train into London, or if I'm I'm sort of in between something at work, and I think, I can quickly have a quick go on that. I find it a good little way to break up little bits and pieces to do.
And I don't know.
If I wasn't doing that, I'd just be sitting on Instagram or doing something else on the phone, more than likely wasting my time away.
Well, don't get me wrong. Social media is one of my biggest time wasting devices, and it's something that's kind of another target for this year is to tail back on how much time you just spend wasting on social media. But that's all good fun. We'll move on and get this show closed out. Extending the Vulcan, so we're going to be recording when I get back. So I'm away on my honeymoon for the rest of January, pretty much. Got some dates booked in. Have got some stuff. We will have an episode coming out at the end of January. Don't worry. We'll announce the Vulcan winner on that. That's the limited edition copy of Vulcan, the book. So again, as with all email competitions, if you enter, you've got a good chance of winning. Just because that's how it works. But hey, it's all good. But if you want to get hold of us, you can do that through the social medias. Neil Paints everywhere, aren't you?
Neil Paints everywhere, yes.
Absolutely. And I'm at Child of Fang in the shows. At Imperial_Truth for Twitter. The Rob's doing a good job of putting up his models on Facebook on the show, keeping a bit of interest, which is good. He's putting out questions and stuff. He's much better at that side of things than I am. So you can go and follow us on Facebook and join the groups as well on there. And if you've got any feedback as well for the show, you can always email greg@theimperialtruth.com or neil@theimperialtruth.com, and we can see what we can do. I did put a question out to if you support the show on Patreon, I sent emails out to everyone on that asking for some feedback, and I've had a handful of replies, very mixed. It's all good in terms of the feedback they gave and what they would like to see and all that jazz. But that's all very exciting and has making me start to think about some aspects of the show again. And got some plans for this year, but we'll have to see just how many we can put into place. It's always fun, isn't it? But but if you've got any feedback at all, feel free to send it in. Any ideas, any requests, any questions, then let us know, and we'll do what we can. The version 1 of the pack for the Cardiff event should be end of January, start of February. It won't be complete because there's a black book dropping soon, hopefully, and there are other things that I think might be happening as well. And I need some time to make some decisions on a couple of things. But I'm going to, once that version 1 pack dropping will be tickets as well. I'll open up the tickets. So say end of January, more likely start of February, probably after the weekender. We'll be hopefully getting that sorted, and I can turn my eyes to start organising Blood and Glory as well. Yeah, all exciting
Excellent
stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Pile it on. But I think we're pretty much there, mate. I need to say that if you do want to support the show, we do have Patreon. We do also have. So I talk about the t-shirts every now and then, and I went on, and some people have bought. We've got a handful of t-shirts out there. If you go to the t-shirt site and you click on a shirt, it also has the other items that you can purchase. So short sleeve t-shirt. Most have a short sleeve t-shirt, a long sleeve t-shirt, and a hoodie. And I've ordered a hoodie. I'm willing to try it. So when that arrives, hopefully that'll be at the house by the time I get back from honeymoon. I'll put up a picture of that as well. And actually, I think I was talking to my old man about this, and I showed him because they've got a charity and they wanted to know what site I used and how to do things because they're old people, they don't know how the internet works. And standard. And he was like, "Oh, they're really cheap, those hoodies." For my old man, that's not bad because he thought the t-shirts were really expensive, even though they're cheaper than most. But yeah, so you can go and check them out as well. But hopefully, I'll be wearing mine at the weekender. Excellent. All good. Right. Well, we've gone on quite long enough. I've still got a pack for a holiday, and I'm leaving in 12 hours. The flight leaves in 12 hours, so we've got to get out there and everything. So we'll sign off unless there is anything you want to add, Neil.
Nothing else from me.
Wonderful. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.